Now, before we get into each specific title that's been released in the Call of Duty series, the first thing you should know is that COD has multiple canonical timelines, ranging from fictional depictions of real-world conflicts to more fantastic ones that see you mowing down the undead. So for this video, we're going to primarily stick with the three main universes within the Call of Duty franchise. Namely, we have the World War II timeline, which basically kickstarted the whole Call of Duty series way back in the day. Then there's the Modern Warfare timeline, which, as the name suggests, more or less focuses on present-day conflicts. And then there's the Black Ops timeline, which happens to be Call of Duty's very own sci-fi-inspired timeline. So with all that aside, let's march right on to the first ever Call of Duty game, a title simply named, well, Call of Duty. Call of Duty, 1939 to 1945. Aptly named Call of Duty, this game is the first entry into the series' World War II timeline. Now, Call of Duty actually has a trio of campaign storylines, each featuring a main character of its own. Namely, these are the American, British, and Soviet campaigns. And given that each of these factions belong to the Allies, of course, you can bet that enemies of this game are those filthy fascists from the 40s. Starting with the American campaign, we first meet a fresh recruit to the United States 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, a young man only known as Private Martin. Our story begins with Martin's early days in basic training, and it culminates when he passes his weapons aptitude test, as overseen by his CO, Sergeant Moody. However, as soon as Martin is done with his training, he's immediately thrown right into one of World War II's most important campaigns. To be specific, our guy is deployed as part of the Allies' airborne ops during Operation Overlord, aka the invasion of Normandy. And like in real life, most of the paratroopers deployed ended up missing their drop zones. That is to say, the various companies and divisions were scattered all around the French countryside, with only their wits, skills, and whatever equipment landed with them at their disposal. Private Martin is no exception to this, as he ultimately finds himself on the outskirts of the town of Sainte-Mère-Église. And in spite of his efforts to install beacons to help guide the other paratroopers to their respective marks, Martin is forced to become part of a ragtag group of other scattered soldiers. Still, Martin and his outfit are able to work with what they've got, and they eliminate enemy units they encounter along the way. Their next objective proves to be of crucial importance, as Martin and his band of brothers mount an offensive to take back Sainte-Mère-Église from the fascists. Not only that, but our heroes also successfully sabotage the Germans' anti-aircraft tanks in the process. These fascists aren't going down without a fight though, because it only takes them a couple of hours to mount a counterattack against the Allied soldiers holding Sainte-Mère-Église. Woken up by enemy mortar fire, Martin and the other troopers valiantly fend off the Germans. Our hero also gets hold of a Panzerfaust during the ensuing chaos, which is pretty much a rocket launcher, which allows him to take enemies' armored units. Eventually, Martin and the rest of his outfit ultimately get rid of the German mortar crews, but it doesn't change the fact that these heroes' morale, supplies, and numbers took a big hit as a result of this battle. So their commanding officer, Captain Foley, instructs Martin, Private Elder, and Sergeant Moody to travel to an entirely different town, Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. From there, they could give word to Battalion HQ about what's happened and hopefully get the much-needed reinforcement their company needs. Martin, Elder, and Moody obey the order, and after a grueling drive that sees our heroes fighting with more Germans, the trio eventually makes it to Battalion HQ. Soon after, Martin receives his next objective, to lay siege on Brecourt Manor in order to deal with the Germans' artillery guns and help the soldiers at Utah Beach push further inland. As with his previous missions, Martin and his fellow soldiers succeed in accomplishing their objectives, which ends up garnering praise from command. So does Martin get a medal right then and there? No. His reward is that he gets pulled from the 101st Airborne Division to become part of a Special Forces unit responsible for undertaking extremely dangerous missions behind German lines. So yeah, your reward for doing great work is more work. In any case, Martin is next assigned to a rescue mission set in the Bavarian Alps. Here, our hero has to free a couple of British allies named Major Ingram and Captain Price. Along with the added task of gathering intel from the German stronghold, Martin successfully rescues Price and acquires the necessary documents he needs, but soon learns Ingram has been transferred to a different camp. The Allies soon catch wind of Ingram's location and send Martin to retrieve the captured officer a month later from a camp called Dulag 3A, somewhere in German-occupied Austria. The mission more or less goes without a hitch as our hero infiltrates the camp and successfully links up with Ingram. A few months would pass and we'd next find Martin in Bastogne. It's the 15th of January, 1945, and the Allies are able to clear the Germans' defenses in the area. A large force of fascists then attempt to ambush the Allies, but Martin and the rest of his unit get to work and fend off the enemy forces. And as Martin's story closes, Captain Foley approaches him as the man expresses his relief that the siege is finally over. Call of Duty's story then shifts focus on the British side of the war effort. This time, players take control of a 6th Airborne Division of the British Armed Forces named Sergeant Evans, and it's set around the same time when Martin first arrived in the French countryside. Evans' tale opens when he and several other 6th Airborne Division soldiers are tasked with participating in Operation Tonga. It's the 6th of June, 1944, as Evans and his mates find themselves airdropped near Caen Canal, with the objective of capturing Pegasus Bridge. Long story short, the lads bravely perform the mission and successfully take Pegasus Bridge from their enemies. However, more trouble comes when the Germans send out forces to reclaim the area. With a bit of help from the 7th Parachute Battalion, Evans and the rest of our heroes are able to maintain their hold on the bridge. About 3 months later, on the 2nd of September 1944, we learn that Evans has become part of the British Special Air Services, the SAS, which basically turns him into a lone wolf charged with going on extremely dangerous solo missions. In his first mission for the SAS, Evans was tasked with sabotaging German operations somewhere in the Ruhr Valley. Our man not only takes care of the enemy's anti-aircraft weapons during the whole debacle, but he also blows up the facility's power lines to fully ensure the fascists' operations are further hindered. From there, Evans reconvenes with a couple of officers, Captain Price, yep, the same guy who Martin rescued in the American campaign, and Sergeant Waters. They then travel to a nearby airfield where the trio takes out a few German aircrafts before commandeering an FW-200 Condor to fly their way out of enemy territory. A few more months pass and we next see Evans, Price, and Waters going on a mission to sneak into Tirpitz, a German battleship stationed in Norwegian waters. Our three heroes manage to sabotage the vessel and gather necessary intel on the German Navy's plans. Unfortunately, this same mission also sees the death of Price. Evans' final outing happens on February 2, 1945, as our man is set on a mission to deal with the fascists' devastating V-2 rocket units. This task requires our hero to think outside the box after realizing that they didn't bring enough charges to sabotage the German weapons. So Evans basically blows up the V-rockets, which causes a chain reaction in the immediate vicinity. In the end, our hero and his fellow warriors make it to their extraction point and get out of Dodge. Now, the third of the three storylines in the first Call of Duty game, the Soviet campaign, takes us to the Eastern Front of World War II. Here, players take on the role of a lowly private named Alexei Voronin, as he and his comrades brave the Volga River on the 18th of September, 1943, also known as the Battle of Stalingrad. In line with real-world events, scores upon scores of Soviet forces are eliminated by German aircraft and artillery before they could even reach the shores of the Volga. Those lucky enough to make it, such as Alexei, then have to contend with more fascists in their bid to reclaim the Soviet capital. Alexei soon finds himself unarmed and threatened by German machine gun fire. He's able to link up with Borodin, a Soviet sniper, and after some artillery support from their side, they're soon able to make their way to the Red Square. Now, in case you didn't know, the Soviets had a certain directive during World War II called Order Number 227. The long and short of it is that no Soviet soldier is allowed to retreat unless given explicit orders by their COs. If you tried running the other way, your comrades would just straight up shoot you. Simply put, it's this whole death before surrender thing that Stalin came up with. Alexei gets a first-hand taste of Order Number 227 soon after reaching the Red Square, as he witnesses several of his poor, under-equipped comrades mowed down by other Soviet soldiers when they attempt to fall back. Regardless, Alexei joins the fray and successfully liberates the Red Square from the fascists after a grueling battle. Alexei goes full action hero too, as he snipes officers from his perch, which ultimately leads to a collapse on the German side. Afterwards, Alexei and his unit reach a train station, which they traverse until they unite with the Soviets' 13 Guards Rifle Division, led by Major Zubov. And credits to our hero, as his recent effort get him a promotion from private to junior sergeant. 2 months later, Alexei would find himself inside a real-world location that would eventually be known as Pavlov's house, an apartment building that had been taken over by the fascists. The Soviets would clear the enemy forces from Pavlov's house and use it as a stronghold. Led by Sergeant Yakov Pavlov, Alexei and his comrades are able to hold on to the apartment building in spite of retaliation from the fascists. Alexei's next outing happens some 3 years later. It's January 17, 1945, and we discover that our hero has been promoted to the rank of a full sergeant within the Soviet 3rd Shock Army's 150th Rifle Division. Here, Alexei and his fellow soldiers are able to claim a facility in Warsaw that the fascists have been using as a repair station for their locomotives. Not a couple of weeks pass when more trouble brews, as the Soviet ranks find themselves depleted. On the bright side, Alexei is given control of a T-34-85 medium tank to help his comrades from the 2nd Guards Tank Army to push further towards the Oder River. And with his trusty Soviet-issued armor, Alexei also plays a hand in cutting down the fascists' anti-aircraft weaponry. It's April 30th, 1945, 3 months after his previous outing, and Alexei finds himself reunited with his original outfit, the 150th Rifle Division. They're deployed to Berlin, where they teabag the fascists right at the heart of their evil regime, the Reichstag. And as with the real world, the Battle of Berlin culminates with the Soviets raising their banner on top of the Reichstag after winning the battle. Call of Duty 2, 1939 to 1945. COD's second installment, aptly named Call of Duty 2, was released in 2005, 2 years after the first game. This one's also set within the World War II timeline, and although its storylines are set within the same conflict, we're introduced to new characters and fronts in this game. As with the first entry in the Call of Duty series, COD 2's campaign are divided into 3 sections, namely the North African campaign, which focuses on the British Army's efforts in the region, another Soviet campaign set during the Battle of Moscow, and the American campaign, which, like the first game, focuses on the Normandy invasion. Call of Duty 2's tale opens with the Soviets, as players take on the role of Private Vasily Kozlov, a soldier under the 13th Guards Rifle Division. It's the final month of 1941, and Moscow is under siege by German forces. Vasily would help the Soviets fend off the invaders. But as real-world history goes, the fascists inevitably took over Stalingrad not long after this. Fast forward a year later, and Vasily is now charged with sabotaging a series of German-occupied strongholds in Stalingrad. Call of Duty 2's Soviet campaign reaches its climax when the Soviets mount Operation Little Saturn to reclaim the territories that the Germans have taken from them. On the British side of things, COD 2 puts players in the shoes of the British military's 7th Armored Division Sergeant John Davis. Now, the 7th Armored Division happens to be led by a returning character from the previous game, Captain Price. It's November 1942, and John's unit is tasked with infiltrating a supply station held by the German Afrika Korps. The mission goes swimmingly, as John and his mates properly sabotage the fascist-controlled facility. Not long after, John plays his part in fending off a 4-fold German assault in a British Army-occupied town in the region. The grueling encounter sees the Brits decimating the Germans' armored forces with artillery fire. But John's troubles are far from over. That's because our hero's next outing comes in the form of the second battle of El Alamein, set in Egypt, which sees John and his fellow soldiers getting into it with the fascists until they ultimately capture their stronghold. Next, John travels to the El Daba region to deal with more of the enemy forces and, more importantly, take out their 88mm artillery, which delivers a crushing blow to the fascists' anti-aircraft and anti-tank capabilities. From there, Call of Duty 2's British campaign moves to a different main character. This time, players take control of David Welsh, as he leads Britain's armored forces in an attack against German-occupied Libya. Afterwards, players travel to Tunisia, where they take on the task of holding off the German forces encroaching upon a house that you and your allies have holed up in. In the end, the player character and his comrades are able to escape the siege and reconnect with their allies. COD 2's British campaign ends at the Battle for Caen, an objective within Operation Overlord that sees the British 2nd Army get into conflict with Germany's Panzergruppe West in a bid to liberate the French city. Then, of course, we have the American campaign, where we meet 2nd Ranger Battalion Corporal Bill Taylor. During his first mission, Bill is sent to the French town of Pont du Hoc, where he sabotages the fascists' artillery guns to help the other allies during Operation Overlord. Not long after, Bill is sent to participate in the Battle of Cherbourg, where our hero is instrumental in getting rid of the German mortar crews raining down shells on Allied forces. The Allies eventually triumph when backup gets to the scene. But Bill is further lunged into the jaws of death when he joins the Battle of Hirschgen Forest to take control of Hill 400, an important strategic position that Bill would end up holding amidst the German counteroffensive. The final leg of Bill's storyline sees him joining Operation Plunder in March of 1945, as the Allies advance towards Germany by way of the River Rhine. Bill and his unit make it through the brutal crossing, and our guy even takes out a couple of Tiger Ones along the way. All in all, Call of Duty 2's entire campaign mode ends with scenes depicting Captain Price's rescue from German forces, the same mission that Martin undertook in the first Call of Duty game, Call of Duty 3. 1939 to 1945. Call of Duty 3's release comes right on the heels of its predecessor, as this title hit shelves only a year later in 2006. As with the previous games we've talked about, this one is still firmly set within the franchise's World War II timeline. However, Call of Duty 3 differentiates itself from the first two games in the series by setting its storyline solely within the Western Front and the invasion of Normandy. On top of that, Call of Duty 3 sees 4 specific storylines, as we follow the American, British and French, Canadian and Polish forces in their respective quest to stop the fascist war machine. Anyway, COD 3 kicks things off with the American soldier named Private Nichols. After being stationed in France and assigned to the 29th Infantry Division, our hero is united with his fellow 29ers Private Leroy Huxley, Corporal Mike Dixon, and Sergeant Frank McCullen. It doesn't take long before their squad is sent on a mission to the town of Saint-Lô. And it's here they add a radio man named Private First Class Salvador Guzzo to their ranks. From there, Nichols and his unit are assigned to the 9th Infantry Division and are promptly sent to Saint-Germain-sur-Seine as part of the effort to clear out the fascist scum plaguing France. The mission goes according to plan, but the same can't be said for their next one, as a dangerous mission in a town called Mayenne takes Frank's life and severely injures Leroy. With the commanding officer and their unit gone, Mike is forced to assume leadership and is in turn promoted to the rank of sergeant. The unit's next outing happens at Forêt-des-Couves, where they're given the job of taking out more enemy forces to give their other allies an opening to advance their position. This is followed by another mission to clear a German blockade at a crucial path, which leaves Mike wounded from the encounter. With some armored support though, the squad eventually succeeds in their task. But it's just another day on the Western Front, as Nichols and his unit are then sent into Chamboy to prevent the enemy from whisking themselves away via the Falaise Gap. Our heroes soon find themselves overwhelmed, so they go for a tactical retreat. Shortly after, the squad becomes aware of a huge German force not far from their position. And although Salvador's radio is destroyed in the ensuing firefight, he's able to tag the enemy's position using flares, which allows for air support to swoop in and give them the help they need. The problem is, Salvador has been pinned down by machine gun fire during this whole process. Even worse, he's in the line of fire of the incoming Allied aircraft. But no man gets left behind, so Nichols and Mike attempt to extract their buddy. They successfully rescue Sal, but at the cost of Mike's life. There's no time to grieve though, as another grunt approaches our heroes to tell them to cover the opposite side of the area, where there's skirmishes going on. In turn, Sal assumes leadership of the unit. The firefight continues and only ends when Allied reinforcements get to the scene and put the nail in the fascists' coffin, securing the Falaise Gap in the process. Sal becomes a sergeant shortly after, and a few days later, on August 25, 1945, the Allies finally liberated Paris from Axis forces. Our tale then takes us to the British side of the Allied effort, as players take on the role of Sergeant James Doyle, a member of the SAS. At the beginning of his story, James links up with his old friend and CO, Major Gerald Ingram. Things quickly take a dark turn when enemy artillery fire shoots down their aircraft, forcing James and his unit to be airdropped to the ground. Our heroes soon find themselves in a pinch when an ensuing firefight leaves one of their fellow SAS buddies, Private Wilkins, killed in action. A Maquis member named Pierre Laroche manages to pull out Mike from the encounter. By the way, Maquis was a French resistance movement during the occupation. Anyway, they then meet another resistance fighter named Isabelle Dufontaine, who debriefs them about a missing Maquis operative called Marcel. Long story short, Mike's squad and the freedom fighters work together until they locate Marcel before proceeding to wreak havoc on the Germans' 88mm artillery guns. They then go on a sabotage mission, this time involving the destruction of a fascist-controlled fuel plant. Our heroes successfully accomplish their task, but Gerald is left MIA, which leads his allies to believe he's been taken out during the ensuing debacle. The group starts to fracture when another one of Mike's fellow SAS operatives, Corporal Keith, brands Marcel as a traitor to the Allied cause. But cooler heads eventually prevail, and both Mike and Keith take it upon themselves to go and look for Gerald. Their other allies from the Maquis soon join in on this quest, and our heroes eventually rescue the Major. Not only that, but they also save a few French freedom fighters along the way. The squad gets to their designated rally point, but are soon set upon by enemy forces. An intense encounter between the two sides erupts, which leads to Isabel's death. In the end, our heroes are able to fend off the Germans while Keith and Marcel patch things up back at their hideout. Our story then moves over to the underrated, though no less important, Canadian campaigns of World War II. In this one, players assume the role of 4th Canadian Armored Division Private Joe Cole, led by a World War I vet, Lieutenant Jean-Guy Robichaud. The 4th Armored Division also includes other notable soldiers, such as their own radio man, Private Leslie Barron, Sergeant Jonathan Callard, and Private Kyle Peterson. In one of their outings, our heroes managed to get hold of a crucial industrial district and successfully hold it against the attacking fascists. Not everything's peachy with the squad, though. You see, Robichaud has a reputation for being a bit of a weird soldier, who recklessly sends his men to go do dangerous tasks when they undertake missions. And at this point, Barron has had enough, so he expresses his disapproval of Robichaud's plan to engage the enemy, given the Germans' superior numbers. Our heroes get a bit of relief, however, when the Polish 1st Armored Division arrives to protect the squad's left flank. They're able to secure their position near the river Liaison, but Robichaud and Barron's beef continues to simmer. Things take a turn when Robichaud orders Barron to serve as their Polish allies' radio man, which leads to the poor guy's death. Not long after, the squad rescues a Canadian tank crew trapped in a German-occupied town. In the ensuing firefight, an imposing King Tiger tank appears on the battlefield, forcing our heroes to deal with it with explosive charges. The problem is, their EDs end up being a dud. In turn, Callard makes the ultimate sacrifice when he detonates the charge by hand, taking down the King Tiger. In the aftermath, Robichaud endorses Callard for a Victoria Cross, and Joe becomes a corporal. The Canadian campaign of Call of Duty 3 ends with our heroes proceeding to link up with the 1st Polish Armored Division to maintain their hold on the strategic point known as Hill 262. From here, our story shifts into focus to the Polish side of the Allied effort. This time, players get into the shoes of Polish 1st Armored Division Corporal Bohater Wojciech. Accompanying him and his crew are Private Marek Ulan, Corporal Joachim Rudinsky, Sergeant Lukasz Kowalski, and their commanding officer, Major Stan Yakovich. The 1st Armored Division sees a lot of combat in the war-torn French countryside, and it culminates with our boys winning against fascist Brigadier General Richter, who's basically a legend within the enemy forces' ranks. The tide of war has turned at this point, and the Germans are gearing up to make their escape via the Falaise Gap. So our heroes are sent to Hill 262 to prevent the fascists from doing this. As you'd expect, an intense encounter between our crew and the jackboots erupts. This leads to the incapacitation of our hero's own tank, a Sherman Firefly. With our heroes forced on foot, they link up with the rest of the Polish infantry in valiant defense of Hill 262. Scores upon scores of Polish soldiers perish in the confrontation, with our squad's own Kowalski among them. The survivors fall back only to battle more enemy forces hidden in their trenches. Still, our heroes manage, and in a stroke of good luck, Barron gets to the scene to radio in some artillery support from HQ. On the downside, our radio man takes a fatal hit before he could give their coordinates. Private Ulan picks up the slack and calls in the strike. But that's not where this climactic battle ends. Rudinsky's the next one to bite the dust after a German tank opens fire on them, leaving only Ulan, Bohater, and Yakovich, the only survivors of their crew. Still, our heroes continue to fight bravely in the face of certain death. And just as they think that all hope is lost, air support from the Canadian military arrives to decimate the enemy forces. Soon enough, Canadian infantry link up with what remains of the Polish soldiers holed up on Hill 262. When the dust settles, Robichaud from the Canadian campaign meets with Yakovich to commend the 1st Armored Division and the rest of the Polish troops for successfully holding off the fascists. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, 2011. And so we arrive on the fourth mainline installment in the COD series, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. This title also happens to be the game that introduces us to the Modern Warfare timeline, which is an entire universe in itself. As I told you earlier, the Modern Warfare timeline focuses on, well, more modern armed conflicts as opposed to the World War II timeline. On top of that, this game's storyline isn't divided into multiple sections like its predecessors. It's a single campaign where players take on various characters as the story goes along. Now, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is set in the early 21st century, 2011 to be more precise. A warlord named Khaled al-Assad has just kickstarted a coup d'etat in the Middle East, while the Russian government is embroiled in a conflict between its current regime and ultra-nationalists who want to bring back the Soviet Union. Somewhere else, Bravo team member Gaz tells their CO Captain John Price that their squad is going to have a new recruit soon, a sergeant going by the name of John McTavish, aka Soap. Soap soon gets acquainted with Bravo team at their Creedon Hill-based training facility and is soon deployed to the Bering Strait. Their mission? To locate a mysterious package believed to contain nuclear weapons aboard a ship. Of course, in true Call of Duty fashion, a firefight ensues between Bravo team and the package's handlers when our heroes get there. They're ultimately able to secure it, and more importantly, find out the intended recipient of these weapons, who happens to be Khaled al-Assad. Meanwhile, the warlord secures his position in the Middle East when he assassinates the leader of Saudi Arabia. Back at Bravo team, the squad goes on another mission. This time, they rescue a man known only as Nikolai, who happens to be the same Russian informant who told the SAS about al-Assad's nuclear package. In the Middle East, however, the situation gets worse when the USMC, or the United States Marine Corps, sends out its own squad of operatives to hunt down al-Assad. This squad, known as the First Force Recon, is primarily headed by Sergeant Griggs, Sergeant Paul Jackson, and their Colonel Lieutenant Vasquez. First Force Recon promptly goes after their target, al-Assad. At first, thinking they could grab him at a local TV station that they believed the warlord was using to spread his war propaganda. No luck though, as the squad eventually learns that al-Assad's messages have been pre-recorded. The warlord himself isn't there. Back at Bravo team, Soap and the rest of his unit are just about to extract Nikolai when they're ambushed by ultra-nationalist forces. Their helicopter is shot down, and a few of their allies perish. But Soap, Price, and Gaz ultimately make it out of the firefight when backup arrives. Nikolai is also secured. Meanwhile, First Force Recon is tasked with rescuing Warpig, a downed M1A2 Abrams tank that was part of an advanced team before it got incapacitated. Our heroes form a perimeter around Warpig and let the field engineers work on the downed armor amidst enemy fire. Warpig is soon fixed, and it helps First Recon Force fend off more of al-Assad's soldiers before the squad is extracted. Soon after, the squad receives word that al-Assad has holed up in the Saudi Arabian capital. So our heroes get to work and play a hand in extracting another squad that's been pinned down by enemy fire. Our heroes soon catch wind that the warlord has acquired a nuclear warhead. They immediately proceed with evac operations to help the city's inhabitants. But the helicopter that is supposed to help them fly out of there is gunned down by al-Assad's forces. The squad is able to save its pilot, a woman named Paleo. Unfortunately, our heroes run out of time to stop al-Assad from setting off his nuclear warhead. The bomb goes off and takes out tens of thousands of people, combatant and civilian alike. Vasquez and Jackson perish, but Griggs survives, since the guy wasn't part of this operation. Back at Bravo team, Nikolai informs the team that al-Assad might be hiding in Azerbaijan. So the squad follows this lead, and what do you know? The warlord's there, and our heroes successfully capture him. Upon his capture, al-Assad reveals that he wasn't actually the true recipient of the nuclear package. It's there we learn that the true owner of this weapon of mass destruction happens to be Imran Zakhaev, the leader of the Russian ultra-nationalist faction. Price puts a bullet in al-Assad after interrogating him and debriefs the rest of Bravo team about Zakhaev. It turns out that this ultra-nationalist has been around since the mid-1990s, back when Price worked under SAS Captain Macmillan. In a flashback, both Macmillan and Price are able to make out that Zakhaev is hiding somewhere in Ukraine. They head to the location and spot the ultra-nationalist leader after 3 days of recon work. Price tries to take out Zakhaev but misses his mark and only manages to shoot off the man's arm. At the time, both Price and Macmillan thought that Zakhaev would have most likely died from his wounds after getting his arm torn off. Long story short, Macmillan and Price make their escape after this attempted assassination. Soon after, the SAS, the Marines, and the Russian government band together to abduct Zakhaev's kid, Victor, in hopes of squeezing out the location from him. Our heroes manage to chase down the wayward kid, but Victor ultimately avoids capture when he takes himself out with his own gun. Zakhaev soon learns of Victor's fate, and the man gets increasingly aggressive. He starts to threaten that he'll launch his nuclear warheads towards the United States as revenge for what happened to his son. In response, Price takes charge of an operation made up of both British and American operatives to stop Zakhaev. However, Griggs nearly flubs the whole deal when he's captured by the enemy. In turn, the rest of the unit mount a rescue operation to get Griggs back from the ultranationalists. Along the way, Zakhaev is able to launch a couple of nukes headed for US soil. However, they don't reach their intended target when Soap keys in the missile's abort codes. After the action, Griggs, Price, and Soap link up with Gaz and are extracted from the scene aboard a truck. A high-octane chase ensues where the ultranationalists attempt to catch them, and the villains soon block our heroes' escape path. With no other choice, Bravo team mounts a last-ditch effort to mow down as many ultranationalists as they can. The ensuing firefight culminates when a nearby oil tanker blows up, which knocks out all of our heroes except for Griggs. Griggs then attempts to get the downed Soap to safety, but the ultranationalists get to him before he could do so. Like a true villain, Zakhaev arrives on the scene and starts executing Bravo team's members one by one, starting with Gaz. The ultranationalist leader was just about to take out more of them, but Russian government operatives arrived just in time. This distracts Zakhaev and his goons, allowing Price to quickly slide a pistol towards Soap, who then uses it to get rid of Zakhaev and his men. Shortly after, operatives from the Russian government arrive to extract our two surviving heroes and get them patched up. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare's campaign ends with a news report pretty much covering up everything that's gone down throughout the story. Call of Duty World at War, 1939 to 1945. The Call of Duty's next main installment, titled World at War, turns back the clock once again and sends us back to World War II. However, this particular game isn't set in the already established World War II timeline from the previous games. Instead, Call of Duty World at War introduces us to the third of the three main timelines in the series called the Black Ops timeline. Part of this installment focuses on World War II's Pacific Theater as the Allies engage the Imperial Japanese Army. The other half of the story centers around the Soviets and the Battle of Stalingrad. Now, Call of Duty World at War's tale starts in the middle of August 1942. Players take on the role of a United States Marine named Private C. Miller. The first time we meet him, Miller and his unit have been captured by enemy forces on a Makin Island. Even worse, the Imperial Japanese Army has started to execute their prisoners. Miller witnesses his brothers in arms fall one by one to their captors. On the bright side, Miller is rescued by another USMC unit just as he was about to meet his end. This new squad's led by one Sergeant Tom Sullivan and Corporal Roebuck. Soon enough, the Allies conduct a counteroffensive against the Japanese as they attempt to reclaim Makin Island. Shortly after, our heroes are shipped to the Peleliu Islands to prevent the Japanese from turning it into a staging area for their conquest of the Eastern Hemisphere. Miller is thrown right in the thick of the firefight, but he manages to create an opening for Allied armor to push through the island. On a much darker note, Sullivan meets his end when he's struck by a Japanese soldier's katana. In turn, Roebuck becomes a sergeant within their unit and assumes command. From there, our heroes are given the assignment to capture an airfield and take out the Japan's anti-aircraft weapons. Call of Duty World at War's story then shifts into focus on the Soviet side of things. It's September 17, 1942, and we find ourselves assuming the role of Private Dmitry Petrenko, just as the Battle of Stalingrad kicks off. When we first meet him, Dmitry has just reawakened after losing consciousness in the middle of the public square. Our hero witnesses fascist soldiers summarily executing captured Soviet troops, so Dmitry chooses to lay low for now. The Germans soon leave, which allows Dmitry to scout the area. He then meets a wounded superior officer named Sergeant Viktor Reznov, who tells Dmitry about his own mission, to assassinate a fascist general named Heinrich Amsel. As it turns out, Amsel is the same guy who gave the Germans the order to execute Dmitry's comrades. Later, Dmitry and Reznov travel with each other until they link up with what remains of the other Soviet soldiers from our hero's unit. just as they're about to lay siege on an outpost controlled by Amsel and his forces. The Russian soldiers spring their plan, and Dmitri even gets to take out the German general along the way. This raises the Germans' alarm, but the duo evade capture by heading for the river Volga. 3 years would pass, and we next find Dmitri participating in the Battle of Silo Heights. Our hero ends up getting captured by the Germans during this confrontation, but is soon freed by his fellow Soviet soldiers. Shortly after, Dmitri meets with Reznov, who then introduces him to Private Chernov, Reznov's personal aide. Soon enough, Dmitri gets back on the field, as the Soviets continue to break through the fascists' lines and clear one of their camps. Back at the Pacific Theater, Miller and the Americans continue their operations to capture the Peleliu Islands. In one of their missions, the squad clears a path for Allied armor by taking out the Japan's mortar crews. After that, our heroes are sent on an even more dangerous quest, to go through the Japanese army's man-made tunnels in order to reach their artillery guns and sabotage them. Miller and his squad valiantly perform their mission, which ultimately allows more of the US landing boats to transport soldiers to Peleliu. And not long after, the Marines are able to claim the island. Somewhere else, Dmitri and Reznov go on an assignment that sees them breaking through the fascist lines, which ends up allowing the Soviets to push towards Berlin. Our heroes soon reach the city, where they first clear its outskirts of German outposts stationed there. With the Germans' first line of defense broken, the Soviets continue to march toward the Capitol building of the fascists, aka the Reichstag. A bit of drama happens along the way when a few German soldiers attempt to surrender to Dmitri and Reznov's unit. But these guys are Soviet operatives, so of course they don't grant the fascists any mercy and instead get revenge for what the Germans did to their comrades back in Stalingrad. Soon enough, our heroes find themselves in another skirmish when they reach Berlin's U-Bahn. Things get dire for Dmitri when the ensuing chaos eventually causes water to flood the darn place, almost drowning him. We don't get to find out what happens to Dmitri just yet, because World at War's story then takes us back to the Pacific Theater, right in the thick of the Battle of Okinawa. This time we meet Petty Officer Locke, as he goes on a mission to ambush a few of the enemy's merchant vessels aboard his flying boat. The mission proceeds as planned, but another flying boat from Locke's squadron is brought down by Japanese fighter planes on their way back to base. Soon enough, the enemy launches Operation Kikusui-1, Japan's last-ditch effort to assault American seacraft by way of kamikaze fighters. During the ensuing naval battle, Locke and his crew take it upon themselves to rescue as many of the besieged American soldiers and sailors they could find. The effort leaves their flying boat nearly totaled, but Locke ultimately survives the ordeal when American fighter planes arrive on the scene to fend off the enemy forces. We then go back to Miller and his unit, as they participate in the ground operations on the island of Okinawa. They prove instrumental in clearing out enemy defenses, which allows Americans to push further inland. The Battle of Okinawa soon tilts towards the Allies' favor, and Dmitri's unit find themselves inside Shuri Castle. There, they come across a few soldiers who tell our heroes that they'd like to surrender. The thing is, surrender isn't actually in IJA's vocabulary. In truth, these Japanese soldiers have concealed explosives under their uniform, with the sole purpose of taking out as many Americans as they can. Call of Duty World at War then gives players a choice whether to save Polanski or Roebuck during this encounter. Regardless of your choice, however, the overall story remains unaffected. In any case, more American soldiers arrive at Shuri Castle after this. And after a grueling firefight, the Allies are able to capture this historical landmark, cementing their hold on Okinawa. Finally, we go back to our Soviet pals and find out that Reznov is able to save Dmitri before he could drown. They then link up with the rest of their comrades, as the Red Army makes its final preparations to lay siege on the Reichstag. Unfortunately, the climactic confrontation between the Soviets and the fascists sees one of our heroes, Private Chernov, fall in battle. On the other hand, Dmitri and Reznov are able to push through the Reichstag until they eventually reach the building's rooftop. Dmitri was just about ready to plant the Soviet flag atop the Reichstag to signify their victory when a dying German operative shoots him from behind. In turn, Reznov takes out the fascist, which allows Dmitri to plant their flag and mark the end of the war, at least in the Western Front. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, 2016. Now, Call of Duty's Modern Warfare timeline continues with the aptly named Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. This serves as a direct sequel to the first Modern Warfare game and is set about half a decade after its events. In this one, we first learned that both the Marines and SAS efforts to prevent Russia from falling under ultra-nationalist control have come up short. Not only did the faction succeed in their plans to overthrow the government of the region, But the ultra-nationalists have also found a way to martyrize their fallen leader and one of the villains from the previous game, Imran Zakhaev. In addition to that, we also learned that a guy named Vladimir Makarov assumed control of the ultra-nationalists after Zakhaev's fall and has since made moves to terrorize the rest of Europe. Modern Warfare 2's tale promptly begins when we meet Private First Class Joseph Allen of the U.S. Army Rangers. At the start of the story, Allen has been stationed in Afghanistan where he works as a training instructor with his commanding officer, Sergeant Foley. Soon enough, Allen meets a Lieutenant General Shepard who's currently looking for Rangers he could recruit for a special mission. Allen happens to be one of Shepard's prospects, and the Lieutenant General is further convinced after our guy and the 75th Ranger Regiment aces a mission where they were able to clear a nearby city of OPFOR operatives. From there, Allen becomes part of Shepard's Task Force 141, a multinational, elite counter-terrorist squad under the direct command of the Lieutenant General himself. On a side note, Task Force 141 also features one of the heroes from the previous Modern Warfare game, Soap, who had since been promoted to the rank of captain. Task Force 141 is soon sent on a mission at a Russian base on the mountains of Tian Shan, where they're tasked with retrieving a device known as an Attack Characterization System module. Things get dicey, and as you'd expect from a COD game, a firefight ensues between our heroes and the ultra-nationalists during this mission. Still, Allen and his unit are able to grab what they need and leave the Russian facility. Not long after, Allen is assigned to go undercover at the behest of the CIA, where he has to go to Russia and assume the identity of a Russian operative named Alexei Borodin. As Alexei, Allen is able to get close to Makarov during one of the missions that saw them taking out some civilians on Moscow airport. Things take a dark turn, however, when Makarov reveals that he knows Allen's real identity and proceeds to execute him just as they make their getaway. And to make matters worse, Makarov makes it so that it looks like the US government specifically sent Allen here to terrorize the Russians. Now, Allen's death causes an international emergency, and the ultranationalists use it to engage in open war against the US. Russia makes the first move and takes over the US East Coast with the help of the same module that Task Force 141 acquired in their earlier mission. As it turns out, the device had already been compromised even before Task Force 141 got hold of it, which then allowed Russia to tinker with the US defense systems and ultimately allow them to mount their offensive on the East Coast. Later, we meet with the 75th Ranger Regiment once more, where the likes of Foley, Captain Dunn, and Private Ramirez conducts an operation to fend off Russian paratroopers from invading a suburb somewhere in Virginia. Shortly after, the 75th are contacted by Lieutenant General Shepard, who then sends them out on a mission to retrieve a high-value individual who they believe possesses sensitive intel. The squad carries out their orders, but soon discovers that their target has already been killed. Not only that, but the 75th notices how the other deceased bodies on the scene have these peculiar tattoos on them. Even more curious is the fact that the supposed safe room where their target and the other bodies have been found wasn't breached at all, hinting that whatever went down there must have been an inside job. They table all of this for now as our heroes are next assigned to defend Washington, D.C. from the encroaching Russian forces. The 75th fight the enemy with all they've got, and Foley's unit soon find themselves nearly pinned down as waves of Russian soldiers continue to push toward the capital. But you'll have to wait for the payoff on that one, as at this point, our story shifts back to Task Force 141. With everything that's gone down since Allen's death, the unit has been using all of their skills and resources in trying to find proof that Makarov masterminded the whole incident at the airport in Moscow. Their quest eventually leads them to a man named Alejandro Rojas, an associate of Makarov residing in Brazil. Rojas informs Task Force 141 about a person known only as Prisoner 627, who, according to Rojas, happens to be Makarov's mortal enemy. The problem is, Prisoner 627 is incarcerated in a gulag somewhere in Petropavlovsk. In turn, Shepard sends out our boys on a mission to Russia in order to retrieve this prisoner. Task Force 141 gets to work, and we soon find out that Prisoner 627 happens to be another one of the main characters from the previous Modern Warfare game, Captain John Price. Price is reunited with his old war buddy, Soap, who then gives him command of Task Force 141. Here's where things get a bit tricky. See, Shepard really has it in for Makarov, so he wants to prioritize capturing the ultra-nationalist leader above everything else. On the other hand, Price believes they should deal with the ongoing Russian invasion back in the US first. In the end, Price gets what he wants when he disobeys Shepard's orders and leads Task Force 141 to get their hands on a Russian submarine outfitted with a nuclear warhead. The squad then uses it to launch a nuke and detonate it in the Earth's atmosphere directly above Washington, D.C. This causes a huge electromagnetic blast that disables all forms of tech in the capital, which allows American forces stationed there to gain an advantage against their Russian enemies. Back in the U.S. Capitol, the 75th attempt to find cover when the EMP blast causes aircraft flying above the city to crash en masse. They end up heading for the White House, where the squad first comes across a runner named Private Vaughn. Vaughn informs the 7th that his CO, Colonel Marshall, is currently gathering as many forces as he can to mount an attack against the Russians, who have gained control of the White House. The 75th links up with Marshall, and the colonel soon gives the order to lay siege on the building. Our heroes don't have much time either, as they catch wind that the Air Force is soon going to swoop in and pretty much level the entire city to prevent the Russians from planting themselves in American soil. In any case, our heroes manage to clear the White House of its Russian intruders, which ultimately stops the plan to carpet bomb the area. As for the 75th, well, they've had enough of these ultranationalists. So the unit makes a vow to get back at the Russians and turn Moscow into rubble once they're done with their crusade. Back at Task Force 141, the team surmises that Makarov might be in one of two locations. So the unit decides to split into a couple of squads. One squad, led by operatives Roach Sanderson and Ghost Riley, heads for Makarov's purported hideout. The other squad, commanded by Soap and Price, sets out for an aircraft junkyard somewhere in Afghanistan. Roach's team is able to infiltrate Makarov's hideout, and although the man himself isn't there, they're able to grab tons of important intel about the ultranationalists. But then things get dark when our heroes reach their extraction point, only to come across Shepard, who reveals that he's basically the one responsible for sparking the war between the US and Russia, before eliminating both Roach and Ghost. Long story short, Shepard and Makarov used to be in league with each other, but now Shepard wants the ultranationalist leader dead in order to cover his tracks. And if you're wondering what made Shepard go through all this trouble, well, let's just say the man's crazy. He basically orchestrated all this so that the US government would ultimately recognize him as a national hero. Anyway, Price and Soap soon discover Shepard's true intentions. They make it out of an ongoing firefight between Makarov and Shepard's forces, with the help of Nikolai. Yes, that same Nikolai Bravo team rescued in the first Modern Warfare game. Soon after, our heroes get in touch with Makarov to cut him a deal that they'd take out Shepard if the ultranationalist gives them his location. Makarov agrees to this and directs Soap and Price to a place known as Site Hotel Bravo, somewhere in rural Afghanistan. In turn, Soap and Price vow to get revenge for their fallen Task Force 141 buddies, and soon come face to face with their target. Shepard attempts to escape in a helicopter, but our heroes manage to destroy it before Shepard could leave. Chaos ensues during this confrontation, as Soap nearly succeeds in taking out Shepard. But the old man has got some fight in him, and ends up stabbing Soap instead. Don't worry though, Soap doesn't die just yet, he just passes out. Shepard then goes on a classic villain monologue, which allows Price to find an opening and jump the old man before he could finish off Soap. Price and Shepard get into it at close quarters, until Soap recovers and hurls a combat knife right in the traitor's eye. The dust settles, and Nikolai arrives to extract our two heroes from the scene. But here's the thing, no one outside of the group knows about Shepard's treachery, so killing the old man effectively turns both Soap and Price into enemies of the US. On the bright side, Nikolai offers them refuge for the time being. Call of Duty Black Ops, 1960. The Modern Warfare timeline takes a backseat to give way for the next installment in COD's Black Ops universe, a game named simply Call of Duty Black Ops. Black Ops 1 takes place a couple of decades after the conclusion of World War II, as we find ourselves filling the shoes of CIA Special Operations Group Agent Alex Mason right in the thick of the Cold War. At the start of the story, Alex wakes up to discover that he's been trapped inside a room where a couple of unnamed individuals interrogate him about certain radio broadcasts containing encrypted messages in the form of numbers. We then move to a flashback. It's April 17, 1961, and Mason's unit has been sent on a mission to assassinate the one and only Fidel Castro. Mason is accompanied by a couple of other agents named Joseph Bowman and Frank Woods. The mission goes smoothly, as Mason spots Castro and proceeds with his job. Afterwards, our hero assists Bowman, Woods, and the other anti-Castro rebels in making their escape. Here's the thing though, Mason soon learns that he didn't actually take out their target when the real Fidel Castro arrives on the scene and reveals our heroes only got rid of his body double. Mason ends up getting captured by Castro's forces and is soon sent to the Russian allies, namely Major General Nikita Dragovich. Our hero is then thrown into a gulag for a couple of years. During his stay at the Russian labor camp, Mason meets another prisoner, and it's one we've met before, Viktor Reznov. Reznov and Mason strike up an alliance, and the former Red Army sergeant plays a hand in helping Mason escape the gulag by inciting a prison riot. A month later, Mason finally gets to go back to the US. An agent named Jason Hudson brings Mason to the Pentagon, where our hero receives a direct order from the president, John F. Kennedy, to take out Dragovich. He's then reunited with his old pals Bowman and Woods, as the squad goes on various missions to hunt down the Russian general. Their search bears fruit during an assignment where Mason and his fellow operatives are tasked with sabotaging one of Russia's Soyuz 2 rockets. They're able to destroy the missile, but fail to assassinate their target. Mason would then spend the next half-decade continuing his manhunt for Dragovich. It's 1968 the next time we see our hero. This time, Mason is sent on a mission to gather intel about Soviet ops happening in Vietnam. Eventually, our hero is able to acquire a dossier containing valuable intel about Dragovich. And guess what? This information is revealed to come from Reznov too, who has since defected from the USSR. The story then shifts its focus towards Jason Hudson, as he and another operative named Weaver are assigned on a mission to get their hands on Dr. Clark, a high-value individual with ties to Dragovich. The duo soon locate Clark, who then tells them about a secret Russian facility somewhere in the Ural Mountains. Clark was just about to explain the meaning behind the radio broadcast when Dragovich's goons arrived to ambush them. Clark ends up taking a bullet, but Hudson and Weaver are able to escape. In the present, Mason tells his interrogators of a story that Reznov once told him, one that sheds light on the elusive Dragovich. It's here we learn that Dragovich discovered an experimental German bioweapon called Nova 6, not long after the end of World War II. Dragovich had a couple of confidants too, his trusty sidekick Lev Kravchenko and a German scientist named Dr. Friedrich Steiner. Upon getting their hands on Nova 6, Dragovich proceeded to experiment with the biological weapon on his own men. And if you've ever wondered what happened to the other main character from the Soviet side of Call of Duty World at War, Dmitry, then I hope you're ready for this. As it turns out, Dmitry was one of the unfortunate soldiers that died during Dragovich's Nova 6 trials. Mason's story ends after recalling the promise he made to Reznov to avenge Dmitry by taking out Dragovich and his associates. We then return to Mason's flashback during his mission in Vietnam. At this point, we learn that our hero and his squad have located Kravchenko, who has holed up in one of the Viet Cong's territories. They fail to finish off the scummy Russian and are soon assigned to another mission, investigating a Soviet crash site. Mason and his squad learn that the downed Russian aircraft is carrying Nova 6, but their mission is cut short when Viet Cong forces arrive and capture our heroes. Call of Duty Black Ops then shifts its focus back to Hudson once more. This time, he's sent to the same secret facility that Clark told them about in his previous mission. It turns out that this place is a lab where the Russians have been stockpiling Nova 6. But we soon find out that Dragovich has been expecting this, as he has rigged the entire facility to blow up. However, Hudson and his squad don't fall for Dragovich's trap, thanks to Dr. Steiner, who basically stops them from triggering the explosives. You see, it turns out that Dragovich has been systematically assassinating people he believed could trace this whole Nova 6 fiasco back to him. And, well, Steiner just happens to be one of these loose ends. Steiner ends up cutting a deal with Hudson, namely information about the encrypted radio broadcasts in exchange for protection against Dragovich. Hudson accepts the proposal. In the present, Mason tells his captors about what happened after they became prisoners of the Viet Cong. He reveals that Bowman died while in captivity, and our story returns to 1968, as Mason and Woods make their escape from the Viet Cong's camp. Afterwards, our heroes make their way to Kravchenko's hideout, where they're able to link up with Reznov again. In turn, Reznov helps Mason and Woods locate their target. A fight ensues between Kravchenko and our heroes. The confrontation ends with Woods seemingly sacrificing himself to drag Kravchenko out of his office window. Just as the villain was about to detonate the explosives he strapped on his chest. In the aftermath, both Mason and Reznov scour Kravchenko's office and soon acquire intel about Steiner's location, a place known as Rebirth Island. It's at this point in our story that Mason and Hudson's paths intersect, because remember Hudson and Weaver are also on their way to Rebirth Island after Steiner cut a deal with them. In the end, however, Mason and Reznov are able to beat Hudson and Weaver to Steiner's location. And in the end, Hudson witnesses Mason execute Steiner as part of the promise he made to Reznov. It's here we find out that Mason's interrogators are none other than Hudson and Weaver. Hudson explains that Mason had been brainwashed by the Russians back when they were imprisoned in their gulag all those years ago. This procedure was originally intended to turn Mason into a Russian sleeper agent that would assassinate the President of the United States. However, what the Russians didn't account for was Reznov, who managed to override Mason's directives and ultimately turn our guy into his own weapon tasked with taking out Dragovich, Steiner, and Kravchenko. Another twist in the story is introduced when Hudson reveals that Reznov actually perished during the riot at the Gulag. The long and short of it is that Mason has been seeing Reznov after that due to the fact that his brain's all out of whack after the brainwashing procedures he's gone through. Hudson goes on to explain that Dragovich has sent out other sleeper agents to the US too. We finally get the big reveal about the radio broadcasts, as we learn that these messages are actually codes that are being used to activate Dragovich's sleeper agents to release their Nova 6 payloads in each of the US states' capitals. We find out that the US government has gone on DEFCON 2 after learning about Dragovich's grand plan. On top of that, they're currently in the middle of preparations to drop a nuke on Soviet Russia as a preemptive measure. Now, it turns out that Hudson and Weaver were planning on retrieving Steiner in hopes of reverse engineering the broadcasts to prevent Dragovich from activating his sleeper agents. But with the doctor gone, Mason is the only living person on Earth who knows where the broadcasts are coming from. Mason soon breaks Dragovich and Reznov's reprogramming and reclaims his mind. He ultimately recalls the origin point of the broadcast, which happened to be coming from a Russian ship called the Rusalka. The CIA immediately sends out a task force to deal with it, which includes both Mason and Hudson. They're able to not only destroy the Rusalka, but also finally smoke out Dragovich. Brainwashed or not, Mason takes out Dragovich with his bare hands before he and Hudson reunite with Weaver. Now, Call of Duty Black Ops story epilogue shows archival footage leading to JFK's assassination on the 22nd of November 1963. It's heavily hinted that Mason was the one who killed him by carrying out Dragovich's initial directive. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, 2016. Call of Duty's original Modern Warfare timeline caps off the trilogy with a game simply called Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, which was released in 2011, a mere 2 years after Modern Warfare 2. Starting immediately after the last Modern Warfare game, Modern Warfare 3 starts right in the aftermath of Soap and Price's climactic confrontation with Shepard. In fact, this one begins mere hours after the traitorous general's demise, as Price and Nikolai take the severely wounded Soap to their other allies in India. They soon reach their hideout and begin treating Soap's injuries. But the action immediately pops off when a squad of Makarov's goons lay siege on our heroes in an attempt to get rid of them. On the bright side, we meet a new ally in the form of Yuri, a former Spetsnaz agent who not only helps with Soap's wounds, but provides our heroes with a path that would lead them away from Makarov's forces. Back in the United States, Russia continues its efforts to conquer the land of the free, and things come to a boil in a confrontation that would be known as the Battle of Lower Manhattan. It's here we meet Team Metal, a squad of Delta Force operatives led by Master Sergeant Sandman. They're given the order to fend off the Russians threatening them near the East River, and as you'd expect, carry out their mission successfully. As a matter of fact, you can say that Team Metal is instrumental in driving out the Russians from American shores, as they soon aid the Navy SEALs in turning the enemy's weapon against them. Soon enough, the Russians seemingly abandon their conquest of the United States because of this. A couple of months later, the president of Russia, Boris Vorshevsky, intends to engage the United States in peace talks at an upcoming summit happening in Germany. This doesn't come to pass, though, as remnants of Makarov's faction kidnap Vorshevsky on his way to the summit. On the other hand, his daughter, Elena, evades capture with the help of Federal Protective Service operatives. Somewhere else, we find out that Soap has more or less recovered from his battle wounds. So it doesn't take long before him, Price, Nikolai, and Yuri go on a mission to intercept a supposed weapons deal going down between Makarov's forces and a paramilitary group called the PRF. They head to the location where this deal is going down, only to discover that no one's there. However, after a bit of snooping around, our heroes soon spot their targets but fail to retrieve the packages that the PRF and Makarov's men have just exchanged. Their targets escape, but Price is able to acquire info about their enemy's cargo. It turns out that these packages are about to be sent out to 3 cities in Europe: Paris, London, and Berlin. So Price decides to dig deeper into this and soon contacts his old friend and CO, Macmillan, who gives them the coordinates for a Somalian warlord named Warabi. Now, while all this is happening, a satellite owned by the French government is alerted to a potential bioweapon threat somewhere in London. So they coordinate with MI6, who then sends out a squad of SAS operatives led by Sergeant Walcroft. Soon enough, Walcroft's squad encounters their targets and are able to confirm that these people are angling to release their bioweapon at the heart of the city. Of course, a high-octane firefight ensues between our heroes and their enemies, and the squad even manages to destroy the truck carrying the chemical warheads. Well, not exactly, because we immediately learn that our heroes have only gotten to a decoy vehicle. In the end, the real truck carrying the chemical payload is able to evade capture. Even worse, the enemy forces successfully set off their chemical weapon in the middle of London. It doesn't take long before we find out that the attack on London wasn't an isolated incident. This was a concerted effort by the ultra-nationalists to wreak havoc all over the continent. Soon, our heroes learn that chemical weapons have also been triggered in other major cities throughout the region. Germany is one of the unfortunate targets of these attacks, which prompts the UK to send aid in the form of Team Metal when Russian forces land on Germany's shores for another invasion attempt. Back at Task Force 141, our heroes conduct an operation to raid Warabi's HQ. They soon reach the warlord, who informs them about a recent transaction he had with an explosives manufacturer known as Volk, somewhere in Paris. But just because he talked doesn't mean he'll be spared, as Warabi soon meets his end at the hands of Price. Soon after, Price relays the new intel to both the French government and Team Metal, who band together to hunt down Volk. As you'd expect, this mission comes with its fair share of bombastic action. So bombastic, in fact, that the ensuing confrontation destroys the Eiffel Tower. Still, our heroes are able to grab Volk, who then gives them a lead on Makarov, who supposedly is going to Prague soon for a meeting with his associates. In turn, Team Metal does Task Force 141 a solid by sharing this intel. Later, Task Force 141, along with Yuri, head to Makarov's purported coordinates with the sole purpose of taking out the scummy terrorists. Their attempt at getting rid of Makarov falls flat, however, when they discover that he has taken their old pal Kamarov as his hostage. Even worse, we find out that Makarov has been expecting them this whole time, rigging our hero's own coordinates with deadly explosives. In the end, Makarov sets off his bombs, and although Price, Yuri, and Soap are able to survive this encounter, Kamarov doesn't make it out alive. To further complicate things, Yuri spots Soap badly wounded once again in the aftermath of the explosion. After making their retreat, things take a tragic turn when Soap ultimately succumbs to his injuries. But not before revealing a big secret, that Yuri and Makarov have ties to each other. This enrages Price, who pressures Yuri to elaborate on this at gunpoint, and we learn that he and Makarov used to be close associates. We also find out that Yuri was present during the big moments that happened during the events of Modern Warfare 2, like the Moscow airport attack. However, Yuri's not a complete scumbag, because we also become aware of the fact that he actually tried to stop Makarov from opening fire at the airport back then. His attempts didn't bear fruit though, and all he got for his efforts at the time was a bullet from Makarov. After listening to all this, Price gets his head back in the game and decides to spare Yuri's life. Soon enough, the duo receive word from Macmillan concerning Makarov's last known whereabouts. Although they fail to locate the man once again, they do get information about Elena's whereabouts, Berlin. In turn, Price shares this intel with Team Metal, who then set out to retrieve Elena from her captors. They take a big L though, because the bad guys manage to escape along with the Russian president's daughter. However, Team Metal learns that the enemy has taken Elena to the same place where they're holding her dad, Siberia, and relay this information to Price. This leads Team Metal and what remains of Task Force 141 to team up and rescue the two high-value individuals. Our heroes succeed in saving Boris and Elena, but at great cost, as several Team Metal operatives lose their lives in the process, with only Team Metal's Sergeant Derek Westbrook surviving the encounter. Later, we learn that tensions between Russia and the US have finally dissipated, while Task Force 141 gets reinstated. From there, Yuri and Price continue their manhunt for Makarov, and eventually spot the man in Dubai with some help from their old friend Nikolai. Soon, a climactic encounter ensues, which sees the terrorist leader nearly escaping in a helicopter, and Yuri getting incapacitated. However, Price goes full action hero on their target and manages to get to Makarov's escape craft before crashing it on the helipad of the building they're on. The two men get into it at close quarters, and Makarov eventually gains the upper hand when he grabs a gun. Just as the terrorist is about to take out our hero, Yuri recovers and attacks Makarov. Sadly, the villain is able to return fire at Yuri and eliminate him. Yuri's sacrifice ultimately allows Price to find an opening to beat on Makarov and lynch the scumbag with a length of cable. Modern Warfare 3's story ends with Price admiring his work, happy that he and Task Force 141 have finally put a stop to Makarov. Call of Duty World War II, 1939 to 1945. The events of Call of Duty World War II happen more or less at the same time as World at War's story. As with most of the previous games in the COD franchise set in World War II, this one focuses mainly on Operation Overlord. One more important thing you should know is that Call of Duty World War II doesn't belong in the same continuity as the original trilogy of games in the series. Instead, this particular game is actually a part of the Black Ops timeline. Now, Call of Duty World War II introduces us to Red Daniels, a U.S. Army private first class belonging to the 1st Infantry Division. He's tasked with landing on Omaha Beach during the Normandy invasion on the 6th of June, 1944. Together with his squad made up of Private First Class Robert Zussman, Private Drew Stiles, Tech Sergeant William Pearson, Technician 5th Grade Frank Aiello, and their CO, First Lieutenant Joseph Turner. Red and the 1st Infantry Division start out their story storming the heavily fortified beach. Things immediately take a turn for the worse when Zussman is incapacitated after an enemy soldier stabs him. Thankfully, Zussman survives his wounds after Red gets him away from the front lines. A month later, our heroes take part in Operation Cobra, where they link up with the 745th Tank Battalion to clear the French town of Marigny of fascists. Another month passes and it's now the 20th of August. Our heroes receive a new mission from an officer named Colonel Davis, where they're supposed to band together with a couple of British officers named Vivian Harris and Arthur Crowley in order to sabotage an armored German locomotive that's been loaded with devastating V-2 rockets. The squad succeeds in doing this, after which they link up with Camille Dennis, an operative working with France's underground resistance fighters. Not long after, Camille and Arthur sneak into one of the fascist garrisons located in Paris to acquire some bombs they would need to liberate the city. Long story short, things work out for our heroes and free the French capital. Fast forward a couple of months. It's the 18th of October, 1944, and our heroes are sent to join the Battle of Aachen to rid France of even more fascists. This time, the squad works with Staff Sergeant Augustin Perez, and soon get rid of a few fascist grunts holed up inside a hotel. Our heroes then find several civilians who have taken refuge in the building's basement, prompting Lieutenant Turner to prioritize their evacuation. Pearson takes issue with this decision, but Turner gets his way, given his rank, and instructs the refugees to board a truck that would take them to safety. Shortly after, Red takes it upon himself to look for a kid named Anna, who happens to be one of the refugees. He manages to retrieve the young girl, but her older sister, Erica, unfortunately meets her end when enemy forces spot the truck they're on and start shooting. Afterwards, Pearson shows more of his incompetence when he orders the truck to leave the scene without any form of armed protection. This causes his relationship with Turner to further deteriorate. Pearson's sheer stupidity gets all the more clear a month later at the Battle of Hirchen Forest. In this mission, the squad is tasked with capturing a strategic position known as Hill 493. In line with this, Zussman and Pearson are assigned to lead the advance, while Red and Turner provide covering fire until their respective squads regroup at the bottom of the hill. The thing is, Pearson took it upon himself to give his squad the order to prematurely advance toward their objective. So Turner and Red have no choice but to rush towards their allies' position to push towards the hill. An intense skirmish ensues, and although the boys manage to take out some enemies, crap hits the fan when a powerful Tiger II tank arrives on the field. Eventually, Red manages to take out the Tiger II, but is wounded in the process. Turner gets it worse as he falls in battle when he opts to stay behind to allow the rest of the unit to retreat. And say what you will, but Pearson knows how to fail upward, because this idiot assumes leadership of the entire unit due to Turner's demise. At least one good thing about all this is that Red's recent acts elevate his rank to that of a corporal. Not long after, Red gains intel that the fascists are planning to blow up the critical strategic point of Ludendorff Bridge, so our heroes soon ambush the enemy forces carrying the explosives. They then head over to a German airbase right after that to sabotage more of the Germans' ordnance. However, they fail this task, and even worse, Zussman is captured by enemy forces. In turn, Red goes rogue and attempts to rescue Zussman. The effort falls flat as well when our guy is wounded in action. Pearson pulls rank and removes Red from the rest of their squad soon after. Somewhere else, Zussman is taken to one of the fascists' gruesome labor camps. Later, Red is awarded a Bronze Star for his efforts on the field and gets an offer to be shipped back home to US soil, back to his wife. However, Red refuses to leave the front, believing that there's still a chance he could save Zussman from enemy hands. Red soon learns that Turner originally demoted Pearson at the Battle of Kasserine Pass when he refused the order to retreat. Learning about this gets Red enraged, so he approaches Pearson about this. The two have a heart-to-heart, and Pearson ultimately can't do anything about it when Red demands that he be reinstated within the unit. The story then moves the clock forward to the 7th of March, 1945, where Red and the rest of his squad finally capture Ludendorff Bridge, which effectively cuts off the enemy from going to and from the River Rhine. Soon after, our heroes enter Germany to look for Zussman. Their search eventually leads them to the fascists' camp, only to find out that they've sent each and every one of its prisoners on a death march. Red and the rest of his team follow this lead, and our main guy ultimately locates and rescues Zussman. The war ends not long after that, and we see Red going back to his wife and newborn child in the US after being discharged from active duty. And in the closing scene of Call of Duty World War II, Red goes to the cemetery and pays his respects to his brother's grave. Call of Duty Vanguard, 1939 to 1945. The next mainline COD game I'm going to cover is Call of Duty Vanguard, which yet again takes us back to the Second World War. As with Call of Duty World War II and World at War, Vanguard also belongs in the Black Ops universe. This one was released in 2021, but as with both the World War II and World at War games, Call of Duty Vanguard storyline happens at around the same time period. Its story starts with Private Lucas Riggs, a demolitions expert from the Australian Army. When we first meet him, Riggs is deployed to the North African campaign to become part of the now fabled unit known as the Rats of Tobruk. He soon participates in a mission to attack a German African corps convoy, but our heroes don't necessarily get the results they want. Next, Riggs and his garrison mates are sent to go and retrieve crucial supplies for their British allies, where our heroes come across important intel about high-ranking fascist Edwin Rommel. Although Riggs and his fellow soldiers succeed on their original task, the unit is accused of insubordination, which then prompts Major Henry Hams to arrest them. Fast forward to about a year later. It's October 1942, and Riggs' unit is assigned to hold the Allies' defensive line in the Second Battle of El Alamein in Egypt. Riggs, along with Private Des Wilmot, prove they're absolute mavericks. However, during the mission, the two ignore Ham's orders and instead attempt to radio in air support to claim a strategic point on the battlefield. The two soldiers succeed in claiming it, but Des is taken out during the ensuing skirmish. Things get worse for Riggs after the battle too, as Hams denies him and the other Rats of Tobruk the credit they deserve for everything they've done in the war effort, which prompts our hero to punch the British officer. It's a bad idea though, because this means Riggs is liable to get sent to prison. Call of Duty Vanguard then moves the clock forward and takes us to the Pacific Theater, where we get acquainted with Lieutenant Wade Jackson, a pilot belonging to the US Navy. As he joins the Battle of Midway, Jackson is accompanied by Mateo Hernandez, his tail gunner. The assignment goes more or less without a hitch, but then just a year later, in June of 1942, Jackson and Hernandez's fighter plane is shot down when they participate in the Bougainville campaign in the Solomon Islands. After that, they effectively become prisoners of war, but are soon rescued by the troops from the US 93rd Infantry Division. The 93rd Boys assist our heroes in stealing a Japanese Aichi D-3A fighter plane shortly after, which they use to help the American ground forces push further toward the Solomons. Once again, our story moves forward in time to August 1942. This time, the story shifts its focus on the Eastern Front as a Soviet nurse, Private Polina Petrova, experiences firsthand the Germans' invasion of the Russian capital. In a tragic turn of events, the fascists capture Polina's dad and execute him in cold blood on the streets of the city. There's a silver lining though, as our heroine and her sibling Misha manage to evade the Germans along with other Soviet freedom fighters. From there, Polina starts working with the Russian partisans as a sniper, and she's so good at her job that she earns the moniker of Lady Nightingale. She soon tracks down the commander of the German forces stationed in Stalingrad, a man named Leo Steiner. So, along with Misha, Polina tries to take out the scummy fascist commander. Their initial attempt fails and even leads to her brother's death. However, this just further motivates her to put a bullet between Steiner's eyes. Long story short, Polina comes across Steiner once more, and this time, she finishes the job. Her efforts provide the besieged people of Stalingrad to retake their home from the fascists. As for Polina, well, she sets her eyes on an even bigger fish, Hermann Freisinger, an SS officer who also happened to be Steiner's commanding officer. Fast forward to June 1944, and our story takes us back to the Western Front during the Allied invasion of Normandy. Sergeant Arthur Kingsley, a British paratrooper, and his mates from the Parachute Regiment go on a mission to destroy the Germans' heavily fortified position, known as the Merville Gun Battery. Along the way, Arthur strikes a friendship with Sergeant Richard Webb, another British paratrooper. Now, the game's playable characters' paths soon intersect when British Special Operations Executive Captain Carver Butcher gathers them to create Task Force Vanguard, a special unit founded to go on specifically sensitive assignments. Kingsley becomes Vanguard's appointed leader, and aside from Polina, Webb, Riggs, and Jackson, they're also joined by a Yugoslavian freedom fighter named Milos Novak. Task Force Vanguard's main objective is to look into a top-secret German program known as Project Phoenix, an initiative overseen by Polina's target, Hermann Freisinger. Our heroes soon find themselves sneaking into a German submarine as part of their mission to gather intel about Project Phoenix. Things take a dark turn for the task force when everyone in the unit, except for Jackson, ends up getting captured by the enemy. Even worse, Milos meets his end at the hand of Freisinger himself in truly brutal fashion. The captured Vanguard operatives are then taken to Berlin under the custody of the fascists' secret police. Freisinger assigns his sniveling goon Yannick Richter to lead their captives' interrogation. Meanwhile, Jackson's attempt to link up with the rest of the Allied forces falls short when the Germans capture him as well. Soon, Task Force Vanguard takes another casualty when Richter gets rid of Webb. Eventually, our heroes manage to escape when Berlin falls to the Soviets. Riggs is the first one to find an opening, and he uses the opportunity to free the rest of Task Force Vanguard. Before leaving though, Kingsley makes sure to avenge his old buddy Webb by eliminating Richter. Once free, the team sets out to hunt for Freisinger and soon gets their hands on him at Tempelhof. They literally set the scumbag fascist on fire before stealing his aircraft. Even better, Vanguard is able to acquire more intel about the Germans' other top secret operations going on around the world. One such operation is called Project Aggregat, a secret German V-2 rocket manufacturing site. In the closing scene of the story, Kingsley gives the order to the rest of Vanguard to take their aircraft toward Project Aggregat's location. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, 1981. And so we arrive at the next mainline installment in the Call of Duty franchise, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Our story begins in January of 1981, when a team of CIA agents made up of Alex Mason, Frank Woods, and Russell Adler embark on a mission in Amsterdam to get their hands on a couple of high-value targets, named Arash Kadivar and Qasim Javadi. Arash and Qasim had a hand in the Iran hostage crisis, an incident that would eventually spark the US-Iran conflict. Our heroes managed to first capture Qasim, who then snitches on Arash's whereabouts. From there, the agents head to Turkey, where they spot Arash suddenly executing each and every one from his escort team. Shortly after, our heroes get to work to take out Arash's forces before getting their hands on the man himself. Curiously, Arash runs his mouth about a Soviet agent known only as Perseus before the team takes him out. Apparently, Perseus is this spy who Adler thought has been dead for some time now. The plot thickens when Arash also mentioned that not only is Perseus still alive and kicking, but that he's actually the same man who orchestrated the Iran hostage crisis. Later, Adler and his partner, Jason Hudson, report this whole Perseus deal to the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, who in turn gives them the green light to engage in a black book operation to take out the Soviet spy. In line with this, Adler forms a unit made up of operatives from various government organizations throughout the world, such as Agent Lawrence Sims of the CIA, MI6 operative Helen Park, Agent Leza Azule of the Mossad, and an operative called Bell, who's as mysterious as it gets. See, no one knows about Bell's background except for the fact that they had worked with Adler and Sims in the Vietnam War, and that they also have a history with Perseus. Bell is actually the player character in this game. Soon enough, Adler's team sets up shop in West Berlin. Their first order of business is to have Bell recount the events that had gone down in 1968 during a mission known as Operation Fracture Jaw, the same assignment where Bell, Adler, and Sims initially came across Perseus. Not long after, Adler's team goes on another mission to deal with a Russian mafioso named Anton Volkov, a man who's been connected to Perseus. Upon doing so, our heroes find out that the mob boss assisted Perseus in transporting a nuclear weapon by way of East Berlin. On top of that, the team is able to get hold of coordinates to a certain Ukrainian region that they believe would lead them closer to the elusive Soviet spy. Our heroes soon find out that these coordinates actually lead to a black site that the Russian Spetsnaz are using to train their operatives. More importantly, our heroes learn that Perseus has wormed themselves into a top-secret US project known as Operation Greenlight. Now, Operation Greenlight is this initiative to secretly install neutron bombs in the middle of each and every major city in Europe, which would render these places unusable to become HQs, should Russia decide to start an invasion of the continent. Even more concerning is when the team finds out that Perseus has been looking into the late Russian general Nikita Dragovich's research on Nova 6, the same bioweapon we encountered in the first Black Ops game. Shortly after, Mason and Woods are sent to Dragovich's old facility in hopes of acquiring a dossier containing the late general's sleeper agents. However, all the duo learns is that Perseus had beaten them to the punch, and all the data about these sleeper agents have already been scrubbed from Dragovich's database. In turn, Bell and Adler head over to Moscow to find a copy of Dragovich's dossier. They find out that one of these sleeper agents also happens to be a researcher working on Project Greenlight, who has since escaped to Cuba. Our heroes then get to work and soon learn that Perseus has already gotten their hands on the detonation codes for Project Greenlight's neutron bombs. Even worse, they plan on setting off these weapons of mass destruction and frame the US government for it. Things soon take a tragic turn when our heroes encounter enemy forces, which leads to the death of either Agent Park or Lazar, depending on player choice. Regardless, Bell ends up getting pinned down by enemy fire during this encounter, but Adler soon arrives as backup and saves them. Afterwards, Adler gathers the team and picks their brain to dig deeper into their memories about Perseus. And it's here we get the big reveal that Bell is actually working for this elusive Soviet spy. It turns out that Adler messed with Bell's mind by way of the CIA's infamous MK Ultra project to brainwash them into becoming his ally. The whole sequence culminates with Bell regaining their memories and Adler asking them for Perseus's whereabouts. Now, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War has a couple of endings that are determined by the choice players make during this moment. Canonically speaking though, Bell ends up betraying Perseus as they tell Adler about the Soviet spy's hideout. This ultimately allows the team to sabotage Perseus' plans of detonating Project Greenlight's explosives. Our story ends on a bit of a downer though, as Adler assassinates Bell shortly after successfully foiling Perseus' plan under the orders of the CIA. And don't get it twisted, this wasn't some vendetta. It's just that the CIA believed Bell knew too much. Call of Duty Black Ops 6, 1990s. It's January of 1991, and we find ourselves right at the onset of the Gulf War's Operation Desert Storm. A couple of agents from the CIA named Troy Marshall and William Calderon, overseen by CIA specialist Jane Harrow, are sent on an extraction mission. Their target? Iraq's Defense Minister Saeed Alawi. It's business as usual for our heroes until Alawi starts blabbering about how he believes he's being targeted by a mysterious paramilitary outfit known as Pantheon. And, well, the man has a right to be paranoid because our heroes soon get into a confrontation against this shady group. Marshall and Calderon manage to deal with the Pantheon operatives. However, they ultimately failed to extract Alawi when a former CIA agent named Russell Adler gets to the scene and executes the Iraqi defense minister. On a side note, Adler actually defected from the CIA after he got framed for being a spy working for Raul Menendez, a powerful drug cartel leader from Nicaragua. The plot thickens when Adler lets himself get arrested by our heroes, who then tell them to give a message to another CIA operative, Frank Woods. This message contains all but 3 words: Bishop takes Rook. Not long after, Daniel Livingstone, the CIA's deputy director, sanctions Marshall, Calderon, and Woods for flubbing the Alawi mission, which leads to the trio's suspension from active duty. We then find out that Adler's message to Woods is in reference to an old safe house owned by Russia's KGB, known as the Rook, a place that both Woods and Adler found during an assignment in the mid-70s. So Marshall and Calderon take it upon themselves to investigate this with a bit of help from Harrow. Along the way, they recruit a couple of operatives they found from Adler's personal files, namely Felix Newman, an operative who used to work for East Germany's infamous Ministry of State Security, aka Stasi, and Sev Dumas, a deadly contract killer. The squad soon makes moves to help Adler escape from the CIA black site where they've imprisoned him. Our heroes succeed in doing this, but things get complicated when Pantheon operatives lay siege on the black site at the same time. As a result, the US government pins the attack on our heroes, which effectively turns them into enemies of the state. Shortly after, our heroes find out from Adler that Pantheon has this whole illegal arms trading agreement with the one and only madman of the Middle East, Saddam Hussein. In turn, our heroes link up with MI6 operative Helen Park and Britain's SAS to raid one of Saddam's retreat houses in Iraq. It's here they learn about a new dangerous chemical weapon known as the Cradle, which was originally developed as a decommissioned CIA facility somewhere in Kentucky. Afterwards, Adler takes on the task of locating Matvey Gusev, Pantheon's lead scientific researcher, while the rest of our heroes head over to the abandoned Kentucky facility. During this mission, Calderon inhales a bit of the Cradle, which gives him a super bad trip that makes him see zombies. In the middle of this drug-fueled hallucination, Calderon also starts hearing the voice of an unidentified woman who reveals Pantheon's origin story. It turns out that Pantheon used to be a top-secret division within the CIA. As a matter of fact, they helped develop the Cradle, which was originally intended to be a PED, aka a performance-enhancing drug. But the likes of Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire would ultimately not be able to get their hands on this new kind of juice, because Livingstone ended up shuttering the project and dissolving Pantheon. The potent drug inside Calderon's system soon wears off, and our heroes find out that the facility's entire stash of Cradle have already been taken by Pantheon. Even worse, they also learn about the fact that Harrow is actually an operative working for this shady group from a recording at the facility. On the bright side, the team is able to use this same recording to get a lead on Gusev's location. And not long after that, our heroes link up with Adler, who enlists the help of his old buddy, Captain Lawrence Sims of the United States Army. The squad is soon able to get their hands on Gusev and interrogate the man. Gusev tells our heroes that Pantheon's stash of Cradle is being kept at Russia's notorious Vorkuta labor camp. The team promptly sets out for Vorkuta, but fails to retrieve the Cradle stash for the enemy. They get a sweet consolation prize in the form of Harrow, however. So our heroes take Harrow back to base, where Adler gives her a nice dose of truth serum. This moves the plot forward, as Harrow sheds light on her motives for allying herself with Pantheon. As it turns out, Pantheon sent her intel, purporting that Adler murdered Harrow's mom and dad. Right now, the shady organization is planning on unleashing their stash of Cradle at the United States Capitol, and then blaming it on Livingstone. This would allow Pantheon to install Harrow as the CIA's new deputy director, effectively giving Pantheon control of the entire agency. Shortly after, Pantheon operatives lay siege to the team's base of operations to save Harrow. Calderon goes after her just as Harrow's about to get on a helicopter, and the ensuing struggle causes the helicopter to crash into a river. The downed aircraft starts to sink as Calderon fights Harrow. Our hero manages to grab a sample of Cradle and uses it to get juiced out, allowing him to wring Harrow's neck as they get dragged to the bottom of the river. Meanwhile, Marshall attempts to contact Calderon to inform his partner that Livingstone was able to leave the capital before Pantheon could spring their plan. 2 weeks pass, and we next see our heroes meet with Livingstone, who asks them to continue operating as a Black Book squad with the main goal of bringing down Pantheon. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 ends with a Pantheon agent named Jackson Kane sneaking into Livingstone's office to steal intel from his database. Call of Duty Modern Warfare Reboot, 2019. Now, before we proceed with the next mainline entry in the Call of Duty series, you need to know that I won't be covering Call of Duty Black Ops 4. This is because this particular game doesn't really have a traditional campaign storyline. Instead, the developers opted to focus on the franchise's multiplayer aspects with this one. So the next mainline game I'm going to cover is Call of Duty Modern Warfare from 2019. Now, it's important to take note that 2019's Modern Warfare is a reboot of the original Modern Warfare game from 2007. However, it's far from being just a simple graphically remastered version of its predecessor. In fact, this game isn't even a part of the original Modern Warfare universe that was introduced all the way back in 2007, as the developers decided to fold this particular title into the Black Ops universe instead. So yeah, it's a bit confusing, but all you need to know is that this game belongs in Black Ops universe. All that said, our story starts in late 2019. It's October. A CIA operative named Alex Keller is assisted by a squad of US Marine Corps raiders during a mission to acquire shipments of bioweapons on their way to Russian-occupied Urzikstan. Unfortunately, the mission goes awry when forces from an unidentified faction ambush Alex and his squad before making their exit with the bioweapon in tow. Later, Alex's superior, Kate Laswell, contacts Captain John Price of the British Special Air Services to ask for help in retrieving the stolen biochemical weapon. Things escalate just a day after that, as London's Piccadilly Circus is attacked by terrorists from Urzikstan belonging to a faction called Al-Qatala. In response to this, the British government sends out Price, SAS Sergeant Gaz Garrick, and his squad to deal with the chaos. Not long after, Alex goes on a mission to Urzikstan, where he strikes a deal with Farah Karim, the head of the Urzikstan Liberation Force. In exchange for helping him get back the chemical weapon, Alex has to help her end Russian occupation, which is under the command of one General Roman Barkov. Back in England, Price, Gaz, and their unit go on a mission to raid one of Al-Qatala's hideouts in London. The operation goes as smoothly as you'd expect, and our heroes are able to gain intel about Omar Suleiman, the head honcho of this terrorist group. The team shares this information with the CIA, who promptly sends Alex, along with Marines Sergeant Marcus Griggs and his squad, to Ramazah Hospital with the goal of getting their hands on Suleiman. The operation is a success, but more trouble comes shortly after that as one of Al-Qatala's top lieutenants, a man named Jamal Rahar, lays siege on Urzikstan's American embassy to free their leader. Suleiman escapes our hero's custody in spite of their efforts to stop this from happening. In turn, Farah comes up with a scheme to intercept Suleiman and his Al-Qatala forces along an area in the Urzik region known as the Highway of Death. Our heroes take another huge L in this operation, however, when Russian forces under Barkov's command enter the scene and get into it with both the terror group and Farah's operative. We soon find out that the mastermind behind the chemical weapon heist was none other than Hadir Karim, Farah's brother and close ally in the Urzikstan Liberation Front, or ULF. However, Hadir has more or less gone rogue by doing this, as he plans to use the bioweapon to deal with both the invading Russian forces in Urzikstan and Suleiman's Al-Qatala. In fact, Hadir doesn't waste time to use the deadly gas, which ends up taking out Barkov's forces and several Al-Qatala fighters. On the bright side, our heroes come out of this debacle alive. We then learn more about Hadir's reason for doing this. As it turns out, he and Farah lost their parents at the hands of Barkov's occupying force during their initial invasion of Urzikstan in 1999. From there, the siblings attempted to leave the country but were intercepted by the Russians, which ended with the two becoming Barkov's prisoners for a decade. Eventually, Farah took over the Urzikstan Liberation Front and made the acquaintance of John Price, who then helped her stage a prison riot that ultimately led to their escape from Barkov's camp. Fast forward to the present day, and we learn that Hadir has aligned himself with Suleiman and Al-Qatala. In response to this, Price and Farah set out on a mission to deal with her wayward brother. They failed to get to Hadir, but successfully take out Suleiman during this operation. On the other hand, the stolen chemical weapon leads the US government to brand the ULF as a terrorist organization, inferring that they're the ones behind its theft. This doesn't sit well with Alex, who decides to cut ties with the CIA and promptly becomes part of the ULF. Somewhere else, Price and Gaz receive leads about an upcoming attack that Hadir's planning to unleash on Russian soil. Our heroes make their way to St. Petersburg, where they link up with one of Price's trusted comrades, Nikolai. Soon enough, our heroes conduct an operation to get their hands on Rahar. It goes as planned, and Price soon puts the terrorist under interrogation. As you'd expect, Rahar does his best to act like a boss and keep his mouth shut. But what he doesn't know is that Price is an absolute savage, as our hero straight up abducts Rahar's family and tells the Al-Qatala lieutenant that he'd put a bullet in their brains if he doesn't answer his questions. Rehar ultimately caves and snitches about Hadir's upcoming plan to ambush Barkov at his Moldovan estate. Call of Duty Modern Warfare then gives players the option to either take out Rehar or allow the authorities to arrest him. Regardless of which path you choose, both Gaz and Price head over to the Barkov estate where they successfully get their hands on Hadir and save the Russian general's family from the attack. From there, our heroes find out about a certain facility in the Georgian town of Borjomi, where Barkov is hiding, the same place where the general has been manufacturing and stockpiling chemical weapons. Kate also gets to the scene to tell our heroes that the Russian government has made demands for Hadir to be handed over to them. Price ultimately agrees to this, but not before cutting a deal with Kate. Hadir, in exchange for keeping the information about the bioweapons facility in Borjomi to themselves. Later, Gaz and Price link up with Alex and Farah to formulate a plan to lay siege on the Russian facility. Kate helps our heroes with this task, and they soon make their move. As is tradition in the COD franchise, a firefight between our heroes and the Russians ensues during this mission. The team manages to plant explosives inside the facility, but their detonator ends up being a dud. So Alex takes it upon himself to manually set off the charges, which leads to him seemingly dying. On the bright side, Farah is able to finally get rid of Barkov during this encounter. The facility is blown to bits, and our heroes manage to escape the blast. In the aftermath, the Russian government denounces Barkov's actions in Urzikstan, while Price meets with Kate to talk about their designs for a special unit of operatives they're planning to create in order to deal with a notorious Russian ultra-nationalist known as Viktor Zakayev, a group known as the Task Force 141. We also find out that Price and Kate already have a dossier containing potential candidates for this super team, such as Gaz, British Special Forces operative Simon Riley, and SAS operative John McTavish, aka Soap. But this is not where 2019's Call of Duty Modern Warfare story ends. Later, we learn that Al-Qatala has been placed under new management after Suleiman's demise. It's now led by a man named Khalid al-Assad. Under Khalid, Al-Qatala has prepared to attack the Verdansk region. So Kate works with Russia's Sergeant Kamarov to counter the oncoming threat. They form a special unit called Armistice as part of this plan, a special team made up of a couple other factions known as the Coalition and the Allegiance. Armistice goes on several missions that ultimately neutralizes the Al-Qatala threat in the Verdansk region, at least for now. But what's more interesting is when they discover intel that this terror group has ties to Zakayev, who turns out to be the man funding Al-Qatala as a shadow benefactor. Soon enough, the armistice is more or less rendered ineffective due to infighting that's primarily going on between its coalition and allegiance forces. This leaves Al-Qatala unchecked, allowing them to eventually release their chemical weapons on Verdansk. Sometime later, we find out that Task Force 141 has formally been established at this point, and they soon intervene in the ongoing chaos caused by both the Al-Qatala chemical attacks and the beef between the Allegiance and Coalition. In line with this, one of Task Force 141's agents, Riley, contacts Price for assistance regarding this debacle. And it's here we learn that Alex actually survived the explosion at Barkov's facility, albeit losing a leg in the process. Long story short, Price sends in Alex to team up with Riley in dealing with the threats at hand. Later, what remains of the armistice catches wind of what's happening between Khalid and Zakayev. They find out that Al-Qatala is distributing experimental weapons of mass destruction throughout the Verdansk region. In response to this, Gaz and Price are sent on a mission to help deal with Al-Qatala. But then, another party enters the picture at this point in our story, a paramilitary group known as Shadow Company, which was established to track down Zakayev after Armistice's failure to perform their tasks. Soon enough, Shadow Company deploys a unit headed by an operative named Marcus Ortega, who then receives word from Allegiance agents about Zakayev's location. Around the same time, Task Force 141 becomes aware of Zakayev's secret pipeline, an entire subway system that the wanted criminal has been using to travel undetected. Price assigns Nikolai and Farah to deal with this, and they soon take control of the pipeline. Later, Task Force 141 are able to tap into Zakayev's communication systems, which allow them to learn that he's currently holed up at a nuclear silo at a spot called Bunker 10. Our heroes make their way there just in time to stop Zakayev from launching a nuclear warhead. Price even shoots the man, and Zakayev seemingly perishes during this encounter. Call of Duty Modern Warfare's story has a rather open-ended conclusion though, as it closes with Soap giving Price a call to ask for reinforcements during the continuing chaos happening in Verdansk. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Reboot 2022. The next mainline entry in the Call of Duty series we're covering is the sequel to 2019's Call of Duty Modern Warfare, simply subtitled Modern Warfare 2. Modern Warfare 2's story begins in July of the year 2022, where Task Force 141, led by General Herschel Shepard, goes on a mission to strike the Russian-funded Iranian military forces to take out its commanding officer, General Gorbrani. In October of the same year, Gorbrani's trusted right-hand man, Major Hassan Zyani, takes it upon himself to avenge his commanding officer and has begun acting as a benefactor for other terror groups. This, of course, raises the U.S. alarms, prompting Shepard to work with Kate Laswell, the station chief of the Central Intelligence Agency. They deploy a squad of Marine raiders under the command of Task Force 141's Lieutenant Simon Riley and Soap McTavish to deal with Hassan. The strike force fails to meet this objective, but our heroes learn that the Iranian warlord has acquired missiles belonging to the United States. Later, Task Force 141 members John Price and Kyle Garrick join Laswell in tracking down one of Hassan's associates in Amsterdam, where they soon learn that Hassan has started working with the notorious Mexican drug cartel known as Las Almas. Our heroes try to get their hands on Hassan afterwards, but fail. This leads Task Force 141 to work with a couple of other parties. First, there's Los Vaqueros, a Mexican SPAC ops unit led by Colonel Alejandro Vargas and Sergeant Major Rodolfo Parra. Then there's Shadow Company, a paramilitary outfit under General Shepard's direct command. This joint task force succeeds in apprehending Hassan, but eventually sets him free for fear that this would cause further tensions between the US and Iranian government. However, our heroes manage to tap into Hassan's private records, which brings their quest to Spain's Galician region, where they find out that the Las Almas cartel has gotten their hands on Russian-manufactured GPS units meant to direct ballistic missiles. Not long after, Al-Qatala forces are able to accost Laswell, prompting Task Force 141 to fly to Urzikstan in order to rescue the CIA section chief. In this mission, Price and Gaz link up with their old friends Farah Karim and Nikolai. The mission ends with a W for our heroes. Somewhere else, Soap and Alejandro capture Valeria Garza, the head of Las Almas. We then get the reveal that Valeria used to be a Special Forces operative in the same unit as Alejandro. Upon interrogation, Valeria tells our heroes that one of Hassan's stolen missiles is hidden inside an oil production platform situated in the Gulf of Mexico. The Joint Task Force promptly launches a mission and successfully avert the missile's launch. But then a twist comes when Shepard screws over Task Force 141 and their Los Vaqueros allies and orders Shadow Company to go after them. Shadow Company soon kidnaps Alejandro. Not only that, but they even conduct a bloody takeover of Los Vaqueros HQ. In turn, Task Force 141, Los Vaqueros, Rodolfo, and Laswell band together to rescue Alejandro. We soon find out from Laswell that Shepard, along with Shadow Company's leader Philip Graves, spearheaded an illegal transport of missiles to the Middle East in August of that same year. These ballistic weapons were supposed to help the American forces stationed in the region, but the convoy carrying the missiles were intercepted by a Russian group called the Kani Group. So Shepard made moves to cover his underhanded dealings, leading to our hero's current predicament. Not long after, Price meets with Shepard and vows the old man's going to get what's coming to him once they're done dealing with the current threats they're facing. Our heroes then manage to take over Shepard's base of operations and take out Graves along the way. Or at least, that's what it looks like for now. In any case, the team soon finds out Hassan's current location, Chicago, Illinois. The team wastes no time getting there, and a climactic encounter ensues. Riley personally eliminates the Iranian warlord with a well-placed bullet to the head. When the dust settles, we learn that Shepard has laid low for fear of the US government and Task Force 141's retribution. In addition, Laswell debriefs our heroes that it was Russia's ultra-nationalist faction that initially stole Shepard's illegal shipment of missiles, a dangerous terror group led by Vladimir Makarov. Modern Warfare 2's story continues at some point after Hassan's demise, where we discover that Laswell has been busying herself with dealing with Al-Qatala. It's the final month of 2022. Laswell assigns Farah, Gaz, and Price to look into the sudden disappearance of an ex-CIA operative named Alex Keller. Yes, the same Alex from the 2019 Modern Warfare game. If you remember, Alex defected to the ULF, which is led by Farah and has since started undertaking missions for the faction. Alex's last known location is somewhere in Urzikstan's mountains, where Farah had sent him to sneak into an old Soviet bunker. Our heroes soon find out that this old structure is hiding a Russian-manufactured nuclear weapon and that Al-Qatala had eliminated the ULF fighters Farah sent with Alex. They soon get reunited with the missing operative, but Al-Qatala had already stolen the nuclear warheads. Alex tells our heroes that Hadir Karim, Farah's sibling, has ascended Al-Qatala's ranks and is now its acting commander. The only reason that he left Alex alive was to relay a message he has for Farah, telling her to either join his crusade or get out of his way. Gaz separates from the team to deliver this new intel to Laswell. Alex takes his spot in the task force. As they chase down Hadir, who happens to be deep inside the bunker, our heroes soon come face to face with Hadir, who traps them in a cell. Their incarceration doesn't last long though, and Alex, Price, and Farah soon continue their mission. Our heroes reach Hadir once again after getting hold of the nuclear weapon he had taken. Hadir tries to make a run for it by riding an elevator, prompting the team to destroy it. The elevator crashes and severely injures Hadir. In his dying breath, Hadir cryptically tells our heroes that Urzikstan is about to be set upon by a group he simply refers to as, quote-unquote, the real Russians. Hadir ultimately succumbs to his wounds soon after. In the aftermath, Gaz and Price return to Task Force 141's HQ, while Farah and Alex link up with their ULF allies to safely get rid of the nuclear weapon from the bunker. Around the same time, Shadow Company has started conducting ops in a few locations: Al Mazrah in the Middle East, Ashika Island in the Asia-Pacific region, and a secret facility known as Building 21. Fast forward to April 2023, and we find out that Valeria has escaped custody to reunite with Las Almas to extend their operations to the Al Mazrah region. In turn, Laswell tasks Alejandro to foil Valeria's plans. Sometime later, Netherlands is taken by surprise when one of its cities, Vandel, falls victim to a terror attack by a shady military group known as the Peacekeepers. Laswell responds to this threat by teaming up with another private military outfit called Black Mouse. Later on, we find out that the Peacekeepers is just another name that the Khani group has been using. A few months later, we learn that Graves, Shadow Company's leader, faked his own demise during his confrontation with our heroes earlier in the story. He's still the head of Shadow Company as he meets with Alex and Farah to propose a temporary alliance between them to prevent the Khani group from taking over Al Mazrah. Our story climaxes when Shadow Company, which turns out is still under Shepard's control, starts Operation Rogue Arsenal, a mission that sees them laying siege to an Al Mazrah observatory that the Khani group has claimed. It's during this operation that Shadow Company becomes aware of a stash of bioweapons hidden inside a secret facility below the observatory. They take it for themselves but are forced to prematurely leave the place when it starts to crumble. And in the closing sequence of this tale, we learn that Khani group agents have managed to sneak into Shadow Company's ranks by disguising themselves, allowing them to steal the bioweapons that Shadow Company took from the observatory's underground facility. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 Reboot, 2023. The Call of Duty franchise immediately follows up on 2022's Modern Warfare 2 with its next installment, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. It's November of the year 2023, and we find ourselves in the Verdansk region, where the Khani group conducts a mission at a prison complex to break out their group's supreme commander, Vladimir Makarov. The terror group doesn't stop there either, as they next lay siege on a Urzikstanian port to steal a supply of ballistic weaponry from Graves and Shadow Company. The thing is, Farah and Alex's ULF forces are also planning on doing the same. Ultimately, the Khani group gets their hands on these weapons, but Farah is able to plant tracking devices on the things. Somewhere else, Laswell gets word about Makarov's recent prison break, prompting Price and Task Force 141 to secure an old power plant they know Makarov and the Khani group are going to use to gather nuclear materials. However, our heroes instead uncover that Makarov is after something else in this place. As it turns out, Khani group's commander wants the biochemical components in this plant, with the goal of refining them into chemical weapons. An encounter between Task Force 141 and the Khani group ensues during this assignment, with the Russian terror outfit eventually managing to escape with the elements they need. Later, Laswell flies over to Verdansk to meet with Arklov Military Base's colonel, Yuri Volkov. Volkov gives Laswell a thumb drive containing important intel about the chemicals found in the power plant. She leaves the military base just in time too, as the Connie group bombards it with the missiles they've stolen from Shadow Company right after her meeting with Volkov. Not long after, Makarov attempts to orchestrate tensions between global Eastern and Western superpowers by framing the ULF for an attack on a passenger plane. However, Alex and Farah are able to stop this from happening by making moves to erase any evidence from the scene that would implicate the ULF for this terror attack. Somewhere else, Price strikes up an unusual alliance with Shepard and Graves to deal with Makarov. Meanwhile, Task Force 141 members, Soap and Riley, are able to get their hands on Melina Romanova, who happens to be Makarov's money man, and interrogate her about Connie Group's movements. This leads Price along with Gaz to a mission in St. Petersburg, where the duo captures a Connie Group agent named Andre Nolan. They then get some more information from Nolan, whose intel leads our heroes on a mission to capture a cargo truck headed for an old Soviet gulag in Siberia. To our heroes' surprise, the truck is actually carrying Shepard, who we find out is a prisoner of Makarov. Price gives the traitorous general a choice. He can either provide Task Force 141 all the information he has on Makarov and submit himself to US authorities, or he can die in the Siberian tundra. Shepard chooses to save his skin, of course, and snitches about Makarov's plans to flood all of Verdansk by blowing up the nearby dam. From there, Task Force 141 mobilizes, with Soap and Riley heading a strike team to stop the Connie Group from wrecking the dam, while another squad made up of Price, Gaz, Alex, and Farah hit Connie Group's HQ along with the Shadow Company. Both missions go as planned. Later, Shepard holds his end of the deal, as he and Graves cop to their own crimes in front of the United States Congress. While this is happening, Task Force 141 continues their hunt for Makarov, and soon learn that the elusive war criminal has acquired a device that would allow him to commandeer the United Kingdom's rail system. He plans on using it to destroy the Channel Tunnel, an important railway tunnel that connects the UK to the rest of the European continent. Task Force 141 gets to work. Soon, they have another encounter with Connie Group forces and discover that Makarov and his men have planted a radioactive bomb within Channel Tunnel. Price and Soap try to defuse the weapon, but their efforts are cut short when they come face to face with Makarov himself. A tense battle ensues between the terror group leaders and our two heroes. Makarov almost takes out Price, but Soap intervenes. Sadly, this same heroic act allows Makarov to find an opening and eliminate Soap before escaping once again. Riley and Gaz arrive just in time to help Price defuse the explosive, and our heroes win the day once again, although it's a costly victory. Later, Task Force 141 pays their final respects to Soap by scattering his ashes on top of a scenic cliff somewhere in Scotland. Now, remember that time Price promised he'd kill Shepard once all his other commitments were taken care of? Well, we finally get the payoff to that in Modern Warfare 3's closing scene, as Price pays Shepard a visit in his office to finally give him what he deserves. Call of Duty Black Ops 2, 1980s and 2015. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 takes place in two time periods. The main action occurs in 2025, while the flashback sections take place in 1986 to 1989. The 2025 storyline follows David Mason, while the 1980s segments follow his father, Alex Mason, and are used to provide backstory for the main conflict. Black Ops 2's story serves as a direct continuation of the first Call of Duty Black Ops game from 2010. Here we meet the son of Alex Mason, David, in 2025. Now, David more or less followed his dad's footsteps by becoming a military man himself. At the start of the story, Mason, along with his partner, Special Operative Mike Harper, go to a black site known as the Vault, where one of Mason's old friends, Frank Woods, has been residing. See, they believe that Frank has some valuable intel about a man named Raul Menendez. Woods informs the duo that Menendez did pay him a visit not too long ago, and even presents them with a locket that the man handed Woods. We also learned that Black Ops 1's main protagonist, Alex Mason, actually retired from the CIA by the time 1986 rolled around. From there, our hero attempted to live a quiet, uneventful life with his then 7-year-old kid, David. But as these kinds of stories go, it was only a matter of time before Mason was roped back to the world of espionage and warfare. You might even say he answered the call of duty when his old associate Hudson approached Mason for a mission that's about to go down in the Angolan province of Cuando Cubango. On the other hand, Woods had suddenly dropped off the face of the planet around this period. At a time, Woods and his pals were helping a man named Jonas Sayimbi and his UNITA freedom fighters against the Angolan Marxist regime, an act that the CIA itself had washed its hands of. It doesn't take long before we find out that Mason and Hudson had a couple of tasks during their Cuando Cubango mission. One, to locate and retrieve Woods somewhere in the region, which they succeed in doing. And second, to capture Menendez, who happens to be a notorious arms dealer who primarily operates in South America and South Africa. Although our heroes manage to weed out Menendez's location during this op, the man ultimately escapes. What's more is that we soon learn that it was Menendez who took out each and every one of Woods' comrades when they were captured in Cuando Cubango. Soon enough, Woods joins Mason in Hudson's manhunt. Sometime later, we find out that Menendez's gun-running operation has reached Afghanistan, prompting the CIA to put a hit on the notorious criminal. Our heroes are then joined by an agent working for the Chinese government named Tian Zhao and Afghanistan's rebels on a mission against the Soviet Union. We also get the big reveal that Lev Kravchenko, one of the villains from the first Black Ops game, actually survived the encounter that happened in Vietnam during this particular assignment. In any case, our heroes are soon able to nab Kravchenko and finally execute the war criminal after a bit of interrogation. However, our heroes hit a snag when the Mujahideen rebels end up screwing them over and leaving them stranded somewhere in the Afghan region. Everything works out though, because the team is soon rescued by a couple of unnamed civilians, one of which Mason believes is none other than his old acquaintance, Viktor Reznov. It's also around this period where we get to learn Menendez's motives. As it turns out, the man has a sister named Josefina, who suffered severe wounds after a random American businessman went nuts and decided to set a building on fire to commit insurance fraud. And that's just the beginning of it. Menendez's anti-American sentiments only deepened when the CIA put a hit on his father. You see, the Menendez family actually happens to be Nicaraguan drug cartel bigwigs, which prompted the US to deal with its then patriarch, Raul's dad. Our heroes soon become aware of Menendez's location somewhere in Nicaragua and waste no time in conducting an operation to finally bag the infamous criminal. The mission goes awry, however, as soon as Woods ends up taking out Josefina with a hand grenade in the ensuing encounter. Mendez, on the other hand, was able to evade capture once again. The man then makes his way to Panama and calls in a favor from his equally scummy buddy, Manuel Noriega, who made moves to fake Menendez's death. In truth though, Menendez was biding his time until he could get his revenge against our heroes. Fast forward a bit and we find ourselves in 1989. Menendez abducts David and Hudson to smoke out Woods. The gambit works and Woods accidentally ends up killing Mason, believing he's actually Menendez. Menendez gets closer to enacting his revenge against our heroes when he puts a bullet in our guys' kneecaps before kidnapping Woods and taking Mason's lifeless body along with them. Menendez brings Woods to the same hideout where he's been keeping David and Hudson. And our story gets even darker when the villain brutally takes out Hudson in front of David and Woods. Menendez would soon let Woods and David free, albeit with a warning that he'll come back for them one of these days to finish the job. Fast forward to the present, and we find out that Menendez has since established himself as a global threat by becoming the leader of a radical group known as Cordis Die. So much so that he and his group have managed to lure China and the US to a Cold War. This was not enough for Mendez though, as he soon started orchestrating events that would bring the two nations to full-on open war. What's more is that Menendez has started working with Tian Zhao during this period, who has since become the head of China's Strategic Defense Coalition. It's also here we learn that David's a commander in the Navy SEALs, and during this time he acquired intel from Woods in hunting down Menendez. This leads David and his team to Myanmar, where they come across a computer engineer working for Menendez, who then informs them of a cyber attack that Menendez's group is planning. Afterwards, David and his team head over to Pakistan to gather more info, which then leads our heroes to a woman named Chloe Lynch in the Cayman Islands. Now, Chloe happens to be the same woman who developed a quantum computer called Celerium, the same device that Menendez plans on using for his cyber attack. However, Menendez has since branded Chloe as a loose end that he has to tie up, so he sends his right-hand man, DeFalco, to kidnap her. You should also know that Call of Duty Black Ops 2 contains a degree of player choice and several endings, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. The point is, players have an option here to either rescue Chloe from DeFalco or allow her to go with him. In any case, our heroes soon receive new intel about Menendez's location, which they believe to be somewhere in Yemen. However, Menendez is able to capture David's partner Harper during this debacle. On the other hand, one of David's allies, Fareed, helps our heroes in capturing Menendez. Once again, COD Black Ops 2's player choices kick in, and we're given an option whether to rescue Harper when Menendez tests Fareed's loyalties. If Fareed saves Harper, Menendez ends up eliminating him instead. If you choose to take out Harper though, the man will disappear from the story from here on out. Regardless, our hero's mission ends with Menendez's capture. However, soon after that, we learn that the criminal mastermind has planned this all along, because Menendez ends up gaining control of the US drone fleet when he's held within USS Obama, an American aircraft carrier. It's also here we learn that Menendez has planted a spy within David's team this whole time, and that happens to be Officer Javier Salazar. Long story short, Salazar aids Menendez's escape, and the Cortes Die leader soon finds himself inside USS Obama's bridge. Now this is the point where your choices as a player throughout the game take effect, in addition to another player choice moment where you get to control Menendez for a bit and decide whether you'd take out USS Obama's Admiral Tommy Briggs or spare him. Regardless, this sequence ends with Menendez successfully escaping before launching his newly acquired drone fleet towards a G20 summit happening in Los Angeles. David manages to rescue the President of the United States during the chaos. Our heroes soon learn that Menendez is somewhere in Haiti, which prompts David and his squad to go after the man. And for the last time, players are given a choice whether to execute Menendez or spare his life. As we've mentioned, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 has multiple endings. However, regardless of which one you get, there are a couple of elements here that are established as part of the Black Ops timeline's canon. 1. David does kill Menendez. And 2. Alex Mason is indeed dead by the year 2025 in this timeline. Call of Duty Black Ops 7, 2025. Black Ops 7 stands as a direct sequel to the events of Call of Duty Black Ops 2, set in 2035, a full decade after the events of that game. This one sees our hero David Mason as he heads his Joint Special Forces unit called Spectre 1. Our tale starts when David and Spectre 1 are sent on a mission to the Mediterranean Principality of Avalon, with the goal of investigating a possible connection between the criminal organization called the Guild and warlord Raul Menendez. This stems from a supposed leaked video featuring Menendez. Things immediately hit a snag for our heroes when they reach a laboratory within the region, which leaves them vulnerable to an attack by the Guild's CEO, Emma Kagan. This encounter doesn't culminate in a good old-fashioned firefight though, as Emma instead tests out her organization's latest experimental bioweapon, the Cradle. Now, the Cradle was originally designed to get rid of anyone who gets in their system. However, thanks to the members of Spectre 1's cybernetic upgrades, the bioweapon doesn't so much take out the squad, as it does give them one of the worst trips imaginable. You know, like bad acid. There's also this plot element in Call of Duty Black Ops 7 that has Mason and the rest of his squad pretty much gaining a hive mind due to these cybernetic enhancements they've got on their bodies. In any case, the Cradle does its thing, and Spectre 1 is forced to share a hallucination based on one of David's old traumas, namely the demise of his father and main character of the first Call of Duty Black Ops game, Alex Mason. This crappy spirit quest involves a mission that happened in Nicaragua, and as you'd expect from a drug-fueled trip, David and Spectre 1 experienced this hallucination as if it were 100% real. Namely, they had to contend with a specter of Menendez during this trip. Long story short, our heroes prevail against this Menendez hallucination and eventually get back to the real world. From there, they proceed to acquire a drive from the lab's quantum computer. David and Spectre 1 then manage to sabotage the facility before leaving. This inadvertently unleashes the Cradle toward Avalon, and if that's not bad enough, the ensuing chaos allows the Guild's own private militia to take over the Mediterranean Principality. So yeah, things just went from bad to worse for our heroes. Later, the squad links up with Chloe Lynch, aka Karma, a genius hacker. With Karma's help, David and Spectre 1 manage to get a lead on an informant in Avalon. So our heroes soon set out to meet up with this inside man, but end up falling victim to another Cradle-fueled trip along the way. During this hallucination, our heroes see Frank Woods, Alex's old partner and David's mentor, as he ends up in Menendez's hands during a mission in Angola. Throughout this bad trip, David and Spectre 1 become aware of Frank's guilt over his late partner's demise. David and his squad then have to confront a vision of Frank who has seemingly become mutated into a grotesque beast due to his unresolved guilt and the plant from which the Cradle is derived. Let's just say that things go boom in true Call of Duty fashion during this encounter, but it culminates when David and Frank end their confrontation with a heart-to-heart talk. Once again, our heroes come down from their trip and are soon contacted by Karma and Troy Marshall, another ally from the CIA. It's here that Karma informs David and Spectre 1 that she scrubbed through the hard drive they got from the Avalon facility. Karma's research has allowed our heroes to get confirmation that Raul Mendez has actually been dead this whole time. As it turns out, the leaked footage is actually slop that was generated using deepfake that the Guild had created in order to throw our heroes off their scent. See, the Guild has this whole scheme of giving the Cradle a general release. And well, of course they don't want authorities sniffing around their shady dealings. In any case, our heroes discover that they're going to need a functional quantum computer if they want to dig deeper into the quantum hard drive. So they mobilize and go on a mission that sees Spectre 1 taking control of a data farm. From there, they're able to ping a location for a quantum computer, which happens to be within a Guild-owned facility in Tokyo. Given this new development, Troy gathers another squad of operatives named Spectre 2, a unit led by Slade Barrick, aka Razor. Spectre 2 is then assigned with the mission to infiltrate the Tokyo facility. Our heroes do so and are able to retrieve a decryption code from the facility that's meant to unlock all the information hidden inside the hard drive. But as it turns out, Razor is actually a scumbag working as a double agent loyal to the Guild. Even worse, the code that he and Spectre 2 sent to the rest of our heroes is pretty much a failsafe passkey that scrubs all the data inside the hard drive. Now, David and Spectre 1 would go on to have more crappy cradle trips after this, ranging from hallucinations of the 2025 Battle of Los Angeles, a vision of New Zealand's Special Air Service mission in Japan. Weirdest one out of all, however, has to be a hallucination that features the kaiju-like physical manifestation of Mike Harper's anger issues when Menendez laid siege on USS Obama during the events of Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Not long after, our heroes snap out of their drug trip once again and are sent on a mission to retrieve a scientist named Gideon Faulkner. See, Faulkner happens to be an expert when it comes to the Cradle, specifically on the topic of how the bioweapon affects people with cybernetic upgrades. David and Spectre 1 manage to get hold of Faulkner, who then gives them intel about another facility owned by the Guild called Sanctum. So the team wastes no time in heading over to this shady building where Emma once again ambushes them with an unwanted dose of the Cradle. This time, the Cradle's effects do an absolute number on David, as he starts hallucinating about his own dad, who appears as a head of the Vorkuta labor camp, the same gulag where he was once held prisoner. Now, ham-fisted as it may be, this particular vision quest serves as more or less a depiction of David's unresolved hang-ups about Alex. In an unusual turn of events, at least unusual for a franchise like Call of Duty, the rest of Spectre 1 pretty much uses the power of friendship to help David get over his daddy issues, which in turn reminds our guy that Alex was actually a good guy in spite of his flaws. To add to the cheesy factor of the story, David's vision of Alex even helps our hero snap out of his trip in order to return to the real world. From there, David and Spectre 1 find out that Emma and the Guild are planning an offensive in several key cities all around the globe. At its core, this criminal organization is basically manufacturing chaos for profit. You see, the Guild's whole master plan is to use their deepfake-generated Menendez as a scapegoat for these attacks. In turn, this will make the rest of the world pretty much willingly cede control of their governments and militaries to the Guild, which would ultimately give the organization monopoly over every territory out there. Of course, our band of heroes isn't just going to let this happen. So David and Spectre 1 take the fight to Emma. The climactic encounter sends the squad to Avalon, where Emma attempts to dose our heroes with more Cradle before sending Razor to get rid of them. A firefight ensues in true Call of Duty tradition, which ends with Razor's demise. The mission then eventually takes the squad to a mining rig just off Avalon's coast, where they find a Guild-operated underwater Cradle manufacturing facility. Long story short, David and Spectre 1 successfully sabotage this Cradle factory. Even better, they manage to accost Emma alive, with the aim of exposing all her crimes to the world at large. With their latest outing over and done with, David and Spectre 1 then decide to set up shop in Avalon in order to get rid of any remnants of the Guild plaguing the region. As is tradition for the Call of Duty Black Ops series, the story ends with a bit of a teaser for what we might expect from the franchise in the future, as we learn that the Guild is still alive and well. This time, it's led by a man named Alden Dorn. Call of Duty Black Ops 3, 2065. Before we proceed, you have to know that a couple of mainline installments within the Call of Duty franchise were released prior to the title that we're about to cover. These are Call of Duty Ghosts and Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, which aren't part of our video, since each of these two games are set in their own respective universes. Instead, we're going to skip ahead to Call of Duty Black Ops 3, which is the next main game in the Black Ops timeline. Black Ops 3 is different from all the other previous titles we've covered in this video so far, in that this is the first game where players don't take on the role of a pre-existing character within the Black Ops timeline. Instead, you get to create your own player character who serves as the main guy or girl of the story. That said, Black Ops 3 is set 4 decades after the conclusion of Call of Duty Black Ops 2. It's the year 2065, and the world's status quo has drastically changed. For one, we're thrown right in the midst of the Black Ops universe's third Cold War, which is being fought between a couple of factions called the Winslow Accord, aka the WA, and the Common Defense Pact, also known as the CDP. Each of these two factions is made up of various nations competing for Earth's resources. It's the 27th of October. The player character and their fellow Winslow Accord operative, Jacob Hendricks, are sent on a mission to save the Prime Minister of Egypt, who has recently been abducted by the Nile River Coalition, a faction that's working with the Common Defense Pact. Crap hits the fan when the player character takes a hit in the firefight that ensues during this assignment. However, another WA agent named John Taylor rescues them, and they soon undergo surgery. This leads to the player character gaining cybernetic enhancements, mainly a direct neural interface. Their partner, Hendricks, also elects to become a cybernetically enhanced soldier. Soon enough, the player character is introduced to their new squad mates, John Taylor, Sarah Hall, Sebastian Diaz, and Peter Moretti. From there, the player character and his team would go on various Wetworks missions for the next half-decade. Eventually, both the player character and Hendricks start working with Rachel Kane, a CIA operative. One of their first missions is to check out a certain black site owned by the CIA somewhere in Singapore. Upon getting there, our heroes discover that the black site has been ransacked by a notorious criminal organization, calling itself the 54 Immortals. They also escaped with some sensitive intel. To complicate matters, Kane soon reveals that Taylor and his unit have recently defected from the WA and has since started working against their former employers, effectively turning them into enemies. Later, our heroes are sent on a mission to infiltrate the 54 Immortals in hopes of finding more about Taylor and his crew. However, the assignment goes haywire when the criminal group susses out Hendricks and the player character's real identities. Chaos ensues, which leaves the 54 Immortals leader, Go Min, dead. Not long after, our heroes retrieve intel about Taylor, indicating that the man is in an abandoned facility that was destroyed in an explosion several years ago in Singapore. They follow up on this lead and soon discover a secret CIA facility where one of Taylor's buddies, Diaz, has been relaying sensitive intel to the CDP. A firefight ensues between Diaz and our heroes, which leads to his death. On the other hand, the player character finds out that Taylor is looking for a couple of high-value individuals he believes caused the explosion at the facility, a CEO named Sebastian Kruger and a man named Dr. Yosef Salim. The whole mess in Singapore then allows the 54 Immortals, which is now headed by Go Min's sibling Julian, to abduct Rachel. Our hero's employers order them to leave her at the hands of the criminal organization, but the player character ignores the command and proceeds to save her anyway. So the player character rescues Rachel and takes out Julian, after which our heroes find themselves in Cairo to locate Dr. Salim. Once they get to him, Salim tells the team that he had performed illegal direct neural interface experiments in the past. However, Taylor and his unit arrive before our heroes could learn more about Salim's experiments. They end up capturing the poor doctor before Taylor personally executes him. In turn, our heroes work with the government of Egypt to track down Taylor, but all they get their hands on is Sarah Hall, one of Taylor's trusted confidants. The encounter ends with Sarah's demise, which allows the player character to link their neural interface to hers. Upon doing so, the player character meets Corvus, a hive mind that arose from Salim's experiments, which started keeping tabs on the inner workings of anyone who has had a neural interface installed in their heads. Here's the thing though, Corvus went on the fritz and became obsessed with searching for a certain forest that was part of Salim's experiments. This malfunction ended up spreading towards Taylor and his team, which explains why they've gone rogue. Oh, and we also learned that Corvus was the one that caused the explosion at the Singaporean facility. On the other hand, both Hendricks and the player character also fall victim to Corvus programming after they linked with Sarah's neural interface. Later, our heroes encounter another one of Taylor's buddies, Moretti, and take him out. The player character and Hendricks then spearhead a rebellion aimed towards the NRC and use it to get their hands on Taylor. During this climactic meeting, Taylor is finally able to free himself from Corvus' influence, but is soon eliminated by Hendrix, who then leaves the player character to go after Kruger. This all happened because Corvus had fully sunk its claws in Hendrix's mind by this point. Afterward, the player character works with Rachel to track down Hendrix, and eventually find out that the explosion that happened at the Singaporean facility all those years ago was caused by Nova 6, the same chemical weapon introduced in the first Black Ops game. What's more is that Corvus has been stockpiling the stuff this whole time. Our hero's mission takes a dark turn when Rachel dies from inhaling the deadly compound during their quest to look for Hendrix. This results in a heated battle between the player character and their old friend, which ultimately leads to Hendrix's demise. Now, keep in mind that the player character has been struggling against Corvus' influence ever since it infected them earlier, and after taking out their best friend, the player character comes to the conclusion that the only way to stop Corvus from further wreaking havoc is to end their own life. But this doesn't work, as Corvus ends up trapping the player character in a simulation, one that has the appearance of the same forest that Corvus has been looking for. It turns out that this simulation happens to be a digital afterlife, reserved for people who have had DNI implants. The simulation has a major flaw though, and this comes in the form of a bug that allows Taylor's consciousness to reach out to the player and tell them how to defeat Corvus. Specifically, the player character has to remove their own neural interface. Taylor then assists our hero in taking down Corvus. From there, the player character emerges in the real world and curiously introduces themselves as Taylor when authorities arrive. That's where Black Ops 3's story ends. However, we do get a big twist that comes from Taylor's own mission reports, which are found in texts prior to starting each mission within the game. You see, there's this whole subplot within these flavor texts that revolves around Taylor's experiences working with a CIA operative named Dylan Stone. Here, we find out that the player character actually lost their life right after undergoing DNI surgery at the beginning of the story. The long and short of it is that the player character's mind actually took over Taylor's body. To put it simply, the big twist here is that we've been following Taylor almost throughout this whole story, or at the very least, a version of the player character who has taken control of Taylor's physical form. The player character's actual body had already expired after their October 27th mission. In the end though, Taylor's consciousness reawakened and managed to regain control of his physical form after the player character's fight with Corvus ended up with both the player character's mind and Corvus itself getting deleted. This explains why the player character introduces themselves as Taylor at the closing scene of the campaign.